Coro's flower shop in Miami, his eyes blazing with contempt. He loomed over her, suit crisp, Rolex glinting, as Nia's fingers tightened around a bouquet of roses, thorns pricking her skin. Blood beaded, but her face stayed stone cold. Owen sneered. I took your pathetic savings, 50 grand, and turned it into millions. You're stuck arranging weeds. His words landed like fists, each one aimed to crush her. Nia's jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as he waved a gold-embossed wedding invitation. Come watch me marry Elise Davenport. See what success looks like. The jab was deliberate, rooted in his disdain for her small-time dreams. He drained their joint account, money from her grandmother's estate, to fund his real estate empire, then dumped her, claiming she held him back. Now he flaunted his engagement to an heiress, twisting the knife in public. A local magazine quoted him, Nia lacked ambition, I needed a real partner. Customers in the shop froze, eyes darting as Nia's chest heaved, her breath sharp. Owen's assistant smirked, tossing the invitation onto the counter like trash. Show up or don't, you're irrelevant. Nia's fingers crushed a rose stem, petals scattering like her shattered pride. Owen turned, his laughter echoing as he strode out, leaving the air heavy with betrayal. Nia's eyes burned, not with tears, but with a fire that promised retribution. The invitation lay there, a challenge she wouldn't ignore. Nia Okoro stood frozen in her flower shop, the gold-embossed wedding invitation burning in her grip. Petals littered the floor, remnants of the rose she'd crushed under Owen's taunts. Her chest tightened, each breath a blade, but her eyes blazed with defiance. She wouldn't crumble. Not here, not now. You'll see me rise, she hissed, her voice low, a vow carved in steel. Customers lingered, their whispers a hum of pity, but Nia's spine straightened, her jaw locked. She slammed the invitation onto the counter, its edges slicing her fingertip. Blood smeared the paper, a silent oath. She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling, and dialed her best friend Lena. He wants me at his wedding to gloat, Nia spat, her words sharp as thorns. I'm going, not to beg, but to show him who I am. Lena's voice crackled through, urging caution, but Nia cut her off. No, he doesn't get to bury me. Her gaze fell on a sketch of her dream gown, silver white, off-shoulder, curve-hugging, high slit, a vision of sensual elegance. She'd wear it, not for Owen, but for herself. Nia stormed to the back room, yanking open a box of fabric swatches. Her hands moved with purpose, stitching her resolve into every thought of that dress. She'd walk into that wedding, head high, a queen reclaiming her throne. The shop's bell chimed unnoticed as Nia's heart pounded, her pulse a war drum. Owen's words, pathetic, irrelevant, echoed, but she crushed them with a single thought. I'm enough. Her lips curved, not a smile, but a predator's grin. She'd face him, not as the woman he discarded, but as the fire he couldn't extinguish. The invitation sat on the counter, a gauntlet she'd picked up. Owen Brantley's polished loafers clicked against the marble floor of his Miami penthouse office, his smirk fading as he stared at his laptop screen. An email from a former colleague, tagged urgent, burned into his eyes. Your Bayside project. Nia's idea. Check the attached proposal. His fingers froze on the mouse. The attached file, dated 3 years ago, outlined Nia Okoro's vision for the luxury condos that skyrocketed his career. Her name was scrawled in the margins, her handwriting unmistakable. Owen's throat tightened, his pulse hammering. No way, he muttered, slamming the laptop shut. But the truth clawed at him. He'd used her $50,000 savings, her grandmother's legacy, to fund that project, claiming it as his own. His chest heaved, a flicker of guilt sparking, but he crushed it, jaw clenched. He poured a whiskey, the glass trembling in his grip. Then another email pinged. It was a bank statement, flagged by an old accountant friend, showing the $50,000 transfer to a charity fund run by his sister, Claudia Brantley. The memo read, discretionary. Owen's eyes narrowed. Why would Claudia need Nia's money? His fingers hovered over his phone, itching to call her. But he stopped. She's hiding something, he hissed, his voice ablaze in the silence. He tossed the phone onto the desk, its clatter echoing. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Owen paced, his polished facade cracking as Nia's words, "You'll see me rise," echoed in his skull. He scoffed, trying to bury the unease, but his hands shook. The wedding was days away, and Nia's shadow loomed larger than he'd expected. He glanced at the bank statement again, the numbers a silent accusation. Something was off, and it wasn't just his betrayal. Claudia's name glared from the screen, a mystery he couldn't ignore. "You can't hide from me, Nia." Owen Brantley's voice roared as he shoved open the glass door of Nia Okoro's flower shop in Miami. His face twisted with a mix of guilt and fury. His tie hung loose, sweat beading on his brow, as customers flinched, their hands clutching bouquets. Nia stood behind the counter, pruning shears in hand, her jaw locked tight, eyes blazing like embers. "Get out!" she snapped, her voice a whip. But Owen charged forward, slamming his palms on the counter. "I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have taken your money." His words stumbled, half sincere, half defensive. But Nia's grip on the shears tightened, her knuckles whitening. "You stole my grandmother's legacy," she hissed, cutting him off. "You don't get to waltz in here and play sorry." Owen's eyes darted, his breath ragged. The email about Nia's Bayside project idea and the mysterious $50,000 transfer to his sister Claudia's charity fund gnawed at him. He'd spent the night digging through old files, finding Nia's handwritten notes on his biggest deal. His stomach churned, but pride choked his apology. "I'm trying to fix this," he barked, interrupting her again. Nia's lips curled, a bitter smirk. "Fix it? You humiliated me in front of Miami." A customer gasped, but Nia's focus stayed razor sharp. She tossed the shears down, the metal clanging, and leaned forward, her voice low, lethal. "You invited me to your wedding to rub it in. I'm coming, Owen. Not for you. For me." Owen flinched, his hands shaking as he backed away. A regular customer, Mrs. Torres, piped up. "Nia's flowers light up this city. You're the fool, Mr. Big Shot." The crowd murmured, their support a blade in Owen's gut. He stormed out, his phone buzzing with a text from Claudia. "Keep her quiet." His pulse raced, suspicion flaring. Why was Claudia so nervous? He drove to her office, determined to confront her, but Nia's words, "for me," burned in his mind. He'd underestimated her, and now she was a storm he couldn't control. Nia watched him leave, her chest heaving, her fingers tracing the invitation on the counter. She grabbed her sketchbook, flipping to her gown design. Silver white, curve-hugging, high slit, a weapon of elegance. Her heart pounded, a war drum, as she dialed her tailor. "Make it unforgettable," she ordered, her voice steel. Owen's guilt was his problem. Her vengeance was hers. She'd walk into that wedding, not as his victim, but as a queen. The shop buzzed with customers, their chatter a chorus of admiration. But Nia's eyes stayed fixed on the invitation, its gold edges gleaming like a challenge. She wasn't just going to show up. She'd burn the place down with her presence. Owen, meanwhile, sped through Miami's streets, his hands gripping the wheel, Claudia's text replaying in his head. He pulled up to her charity's headquarters, his jaw clenched. "What are you hiding, Claudia?" he muttered, slamming the car door. The truth was slipping through his fingers, and Nia was no longer the woman he could dismiss. Her fire was rising, and he was starting to feel the heat. "You're stronger than his lies," Lena's voice cut through the hum of Nia Okoro's flower shop, her words a lifeline as Nia's hands wove lilies into a bouquet, her fingers trembling with rage. Owen's confrontation still burned, his half-assed apology, his smug invitation to his wedding. Nia's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding, but she forced a smile for the kids crowded around her workbench. "Like this," she said, her voice steady, guiding a girl's small hands to tuck a rose into a centerpiece. The children from a local shelter beamed, their laughter a shield against her pain. Nia's shop was a haven, its shelves bursting with vibrant blooms she'd crafted into art. She gifted these kids free lessons, pouring her heart into their joy. Her chest tightened, Owen's words, pathetic, irrelevant, clawing at her, but she shoved them down. A man entered, his tailored suit sharp, eyes warm. Vincent Hargrove, a venture capitalist, held a business card, his gaze locking on Nia's deft hands. "These are stunning," he said, nodding at a floral arch. "You're a visionary." Nia's lips twitched, a spark of pride flaring. She brushed her straight, sleek hair back, her pulse quickening. "Just doing what I love," she replied, her voice firm but soft. Vincent lingered, asking about her dreams. "A chain of shops," Nia admitted, her eyes blazing with ambition. "To share beauty with everyone." He handed her his card, his smile genuine. "Let's talk. I invest in visionaries." The kids cheered as Nia finished their bouquet, her heart pounding, a war drum of hope. She glanced at the wedding invitation on the counter, its gold edges a taunt. Owen thought he'd broken her, but Vincent saw her fire. She'd wear that silver-white gown, step out of a Maybach convertible, and make him choke on his arrogance. The kids' laughter echoed as she tucked Vincent's card into her pocket, her resolve a blade sharpened for battle. "I'm sorry, Nia, I was wrong." Owen Brantley's voice cracked as he stood in the dimly lit Miami cafe, his hands clenched, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Nia Okoro sat across from him, her posture rigid, fingers gripping a coffee mug so tightly her knuckles paled. Her sleek, straight hair framed her face, a mask of cold resolve. Owen's apology reeked of desperation, not remorse. "You stole my money, my dreams," Nia cut in, her words slicing like a blade. "You don't get to just say sorry." Owen leaned forward, his tie askew, voice rising. "I'm trying to make this right," he snapped, cutting her off. Nia's eyes flared, her jaw locked, but she held her ground. "Right? You invited me to your wedding to gloat." Her voice was low, venomous, each syllable a dart. Owen flinched, his hands shaking, the bank statement from Claudia's charity fund burning in his pocket. He slid a folded letter across the table, his fingers trembling. "I found this," he muttered. "I didn't know." Nia's pulse hammered as she snatched the letter, her eyes scanning the faded ink. It was from Claudia Brantley, Owen's sister, dated 3 years ago, instructing him to transfer Nia's $50,000 to her charity fund to cover discrepancies. Nia's breath caught, her nails digging into her palm. "You knew," she hissed, her voice a whip. "You let her bury my future." Owen opened his mouth, but Nia slammed the letter down, the table rattling. "You want forgiveness? Prove it. Admit everything at your wedding, in front of everyone." Owen's face paled, his throat bobbing. "Nia, I can't." "Then we're done," she snapped, standing, her chair scraping the floor. The cafe's patrons stared, their whispers abuzz, but Nia's gaze was steel. She stormed out, the letter clutched in her hand, her heart pounding like a war drum. Owen slumped, his fingers raking through his hair, Claudia's name a curse on his lips. Why had she needed Nia's money? His phone buzzed. Another text from Claudia. "Don't let her ruin us." His stomach twisted, suspicion clawing deeper. Nia, outside, leaned against the cafe wall, her chest heaving, the letter a ticking bomb. She dialed Vincent Hargrove, her voice steady despite the fire in her veins. "I found something," she said, her words sharp. "Claudia's involved." Vincent's voice was calm, a lifeline. "Bring it to me. We'll dig deeper." Nia's lips curved, not a smile, but a predator's grin. She slipped the letter into her purse, her mind racing. Owen thought he could control her with a weak apology, but he'd unleashed a storm. She'd walk into that wedding, her silver-white gown blazing, stepping from a Maybach convertible with Vincent at her side. The letter was her weapon, Claudia its target. Nia's heels clicked on the pavement, each step a vow to burn Owen's world to ash. Back in the cafe, Owen stared at the empty chair, his hands shaking, the weight of Nia's demand crushing him. He'd underestimated her, and now Claudia's secrets were pulling him under. The wedding loomed, a stage for Nia's reckoning, and he was no longer the director. "Keep that woman away, or we're done." Claudia Brantley's voice hissed like a snake, her manicured nails digging into the armrest of her leather chair in the sleek Miami office of her charity foundation. Her eyes, cold and calculating, locked on her brother Owen, whose face paled, sweat beading on his brow. The letter Nia Okoro found, Claudia's order to transfer Nia's $50,000 to cover discrepancies burned in his pocket, a ticking bomb. Owen's hands shook, his voice low. "She's coming to the wedding, Claudia. She knows." Claudia's lips curled into a sneer, her heels clicking as she rose, towering over him. "Knows what? Your pathetic ex can't touch me." Her words dripped venom, slicing through Owen's crumbling confidence. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off, her finger jabbing the air. "You let her get that letter. You're weak." Owen's jaw clenched, his fists balling. "I didn't know you used her money to hide your mess," he snapped. But Claudia's laugh was sharp, a blade. "You think I built this empire by playing fair?" She leaned in, her breath hot, eyes glinting with malice. "Nia's a nobody. I'll bury her if she talks." Owen's stomach twisted, his pulse hammering as Claudia's true colors bled through. She wasn't just covering discrepancies. She was laundering money through her charity, using Nia's savings as a drop in a much larger scheme. Her hostility toward Nia wasn't personal, it was survival. Claudia grabbed her phone, barking orders to an assistant. "Watch Nia Okoro. She steps out of line. Make it hurt." Owen flinched, his throat tight. "You can't." "I can," Claudia spat, cutting him off again. "And you'll keep quiet, or you're next." She turned, her silhouette a shadow of power, leaving Owen frozen, his hands trembling. He'd thought Nia was the threat, but Claudia's claws were sharper. The letter in his pocket felt heavier, a key to a truth he couldn't unsee. Claudia's assistant slipped out, already tailing Nia's flower shop, while Owen stood, his breath ragged, realizing he'd unleashed a monster. "Nia's vow, prove it," echoed in his skull, a warning he'd ignored. Now Claudia's scheme loomed larger than his betrayal, and Nia was walking into a viper's nest. The wedding was 2 days away, and Claudia's threat hung like a guillotine. Owen gripped the letter, his knuckles white, knowing he'd have to choose a side soon. "You're playing with fire, Nia." Vincent Hargrove's voice sliced through the hum of his Miami penthouse office, his eyes sharp as he leaned over a stack of documents. Nia Okoro's stolen letter from Claudia Brantley glaring under the desk lamp. Nia's fingers gripped the edge of his desk, her knuckles whitening, her sleek, straight hair falling like a curtain as she leaned in, her jaw locked. "I'm done hiding," she snapped, her voice a blade cutting through the tension. Claudia's letter, ordering Owen to funnel Nia's $50,000 into her charity to cover discrepancies, was a grenade, and Nia was ready to pull the pin. Her pulse hammered, Owen's betrayal and Claudia's venom fueling her fire. Vincent's hands shot up, silencing her. "We need proof, not just anger." His tone was steel, but his eyes held a flicker of admiration. Nia's chest heaved, her nails digging into the wood. She'd trusted Vincent since he saw her potential at the flower shop, and now he was her anchor in this storm. "That letter's a start," she said, her words sharp. "Claudia's dirty, and Owen's her puppet." Vincent nodded, his fingers flying across his laptop, pulling up encrypted files from a contact, a former accountant at Claudia's charity. Nia paced, her heels clicking, her mind racing. The accountant, Maya, met them in a shadowed diner, her hands trembling as she slid a USB drive across the table. "Claudia's been laundering money," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your $50,000 was just a drop. She's hiding millions through fake donations." Nia's breath caught, her fists clenching. "Millions?" she hissed, her eyes blazing. Maya nodded, glancing over her shoulder. "She used your money to plug a hole in a real estate deal tied to Owen's projects." Nia's stomach twisted, her teeth grinding. Owen hadn't just stolen her savings, he'd sold her out to Claudia's empire of lies. Vincent's hand grazed Nia's arm, steadying her. "We need more," he said, his voice low, urgent. They dove into the USB's files, spreadsheets flashing on Vincent's screen, revealing a web of transfers linking Claudia's charity to offshore accounts. Nia's heart pounded, a war drum, as she spotted her $50,000 buried in a transaction labeled consulting fee. Her fingers shook, pointing at the screen. "That's mine," she spat, her voice venomous. Vincent's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "We've got her," he said, but his tone held a warning. "Claudia's dangerous. She's watching you." Nia's pulse spiked, her mind flashing to a black SUV tailing her shop the night before. She shoved the fear down, her lips curling into a predator's grin. Let her watch. I'm coming for her. They met Maya again, this time at a safe house, where she handed over a ledger. Hard evidence of Claudia's fraud, with Nia's money as the cornerstone. Nia's hands trembled as she flipped through it, her breath ragged. Each page was a nail in Claudia's coffin, but also a risk. Maya's voice shook. If Claudia finds out, I'm done. Nia gripped her hand, her eyes fierce. You're not alone, she said, her voice steel. Vincent arranged for Maya's protection, his resources a shield, but Nia's resolve was the true weapon. She slipped the ledger into her bag, her fingers brushing the wedding invitation. Owen's public apology was her demand, but Claudia's downfall was her mission. The wedding was tomorrow and Nia's plan crystallized. She'd walk in, silver-white gown blazing, stepping from a Maybach convertible with Vincent at her side, the ledger her sword. Claudia's text to Owen, "Keep her quiet," echoed in Nia's mind, a taunt she'd turn into ruin. Vincent watched her, his eyes gleaming with pride. You're unstoppable, he said, his voice a spark. Nia's chest swelled, her fire unyielding. She wasn't just fighting for her money, she was dismantling an empire. The ledger burned in her bag, a ticking bomb ready to detonate at the wedding. You sold my life for your lies. Nia Okoro's voice exploded in Vincent Hargrove's Miami office, her hands slamming the ledger onto his desk, pages fluttering like a storm. Her sleek, straight hair whipped as she leaned forward, eyes blazing, her pulse a war drum. The ledger, stained with ink and betrayal, laid bare Claudia Brantley's scheme. Nia's $50,000 stolen by Owen wasn't just a cover for discrepancies. It was the cornerstone of a money-laundering empire. Vincent's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the ledger, his eyes scanning rows of illicit transfers. This is bigger than we thought, he hissed, his voice sharp as a blade. Nia's chest heaved, her nails digging into her palms, blood beating. Claudia used my money to wash millions, she spat, her words venom. The ledger showed her $50,000 funneled into fake donations, masking funds for offshore accounts tied to Owen's real estate deals. But the truth cut deeper. Owen wasn't just a thief. He was Claudia's pawn, knowingly signing off on transfers to protect her empire. Nia's breath caught, her teeth grinding as she flipped to a page with Owen's signature, dated the day he left her. He knew, she whispered, her voice a raw wound. Vincent's hand shot out, steadying her arm. He betrayed you twice, he said, his tone steel, eyes fierce with resolve. They cross-referenced the ledger with Maya's USB files, uncovering a network of shell companies Claudia used to siphon millions, threatening Miami's charity community. Nia's heart pounded, her fingers trembling as she traced a line linking her money to a deal that built Owen's Bayside condos. Her idea, her legacy, stolen. They built their empire on my back, she snarled, her voice a whip. Vincent's eyes met hers, his nod firm. We'll end it. Nia's lips curled, a predator's grin, as she clutched the ledger, its weight a promise of ruin. The wedding was hours away, and this truth would be her weapon. She'd step from that Maybach convertible, silver-white gown blazing, and tear Claudia's world apart. Vincent dialed his lawyer, his voice urgent. Get this to the press, he ordered, his hand brushing Nia's, a spark of trust. Nia's resolve burned hotter, her eyes locked on the ledger. Claudia thought she was untouchable. Owen thought he'd buried her. They were wrong. The truth was a blade, and Nia was ready to wield it. You're a nobody who'll stay a nobody. Claudia Brantley's voice lashed out, her eyes glinting like knives as she cornered Nia Okoro in a shadowed hallway just off the glittering Miami wedding hall. Nia's silver-white gown shimmered, hugging her curves, its off-shoulder design and high slits screaming defiance, but her pulse hammered as Claudia's manicured nails jabbed the air. Nia's hand clutched the ledger, her knuckles whitening, the evidence of Claudia's money-laundering empire burning against her skin. She'd stepped from the Maybach convertible moments ago, arm in arm with Vincent Hargrove, her arrival silencing the crowd, Owen's stunned gaze locking on her. Now Claudia's sneer twisted, her voice venom. You think you can ruin me? She lunged, snatching at the ledger, but Nia jerked back, her heels scraping the floor, her jaw clenched tight. "You used my money to build your lies," Nia spat, her words sharp as thorns. Claudia's laugh was cold, cutting Nia off. "You're nothing but a flower girl." Her hand shot out, grabbing Nia's wrist, nails digging in, drawing blood. Nia's breath caught, pain searing, but her eyes blazed, unyielding. "Let go," she hissed, her voice a whip. But Claudia tightened her grip, her face inches away. "Give me that ledger, or you'll regret it." A shadow moved, a hired thug, his bulk looming, sent by Claudia to steal the evidence. Nia's heart pounded, a war drum, as the thug's hand grazed her bag. She yanked free, her elbow slamming into Claudia's chest, sending her stumbling. "You're done," Nia snarled, her voice steel, but the thug lunged, pinning her against the wall, his breath hot. Nia's fingers clawed at her bag, protecting the ledger, her teeth grinding as she kicked, her heel connecting with his shin. He grunted, loosening his grip, but Claudia's voice sliced through. "Take it," she barked, her eyes wild. Vincent's shout echoed from the hall. "Nia!" His footsteps thundering closer. Nia's chest heaved, her resolve a blade. She twisted, shoving the thug back, her nails raking his arm. The ledger stayed in her grip, her lifeline to justice. Claudia's face paled, her control slipping as Vincent burst in, his fist clenched, eyes fierce. "Back off!" he roared, pulling Nia behind him. The thug hesitated, Claudia's orders faltering. Nia's breath was ragged, her wrist bleeding, but her eyes burned with fire. She'd faced Claudia's claws and survived. The wedding hall's music pulsed beyond the door, the crowd oblivious. But Nia's fight was far from over. She clutched the ledger, her lips curling into a predator's grin. Claudia thought she'd break her, but Nia was forged in steel, ready to wield the truth like a sword. "You can't stop me now!" Nia Okoro's voice cut like a blade, her breath ragged as she stumbled into Vincent Hargrove's arms, the ledger still clutched tight against her silver-white gown, its high slit torn from the scuffle with Claudia's thug. Blood trickled from her wrist. Claudia's nail marks raw, but her eyes burned with fire, unyielding. The Miami wedding hall's music pulsed beyond the shadowed hallway, guests oblivious to the chaos. Vincent's jaw clenched, his fist balled as he scanned Nia for injuries, his voice low, urgent. "We need to end this." Nia's chest heaved, her teeth grinding, but she nodded, her grip on the ledger iron. "Claudia's going down," she hissed, her words venom. Vincent pulled her to a quiet corner, his phone already buzzing with a call from Maya, their whistleblower accountant. "I found it," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "A recording. Claudia admitting everything." Nia's pulse hammered, a war drum, as Vincent patched Maya through on speaker. The recording crackled, Claudia's voice cold, smug. "Owen's ex was easy to fleece. Her 50 grand covered our tracks perfectly." Nia's nails dug into her palm, blood beating anew, her heart pounding with rage. "She used me," Nia snarled, her voice a whip. Vincent's eyes met hers, fierce with resolve. "We've got her now." They raced to Vincent's laptop, parked in a private room off the hall, Nia's heels clicking, her torn gown trailing like a battle flag. Maya sent the audio file, and Vincent's tech contact decrypted a backup of Claudia's emails, revealing orders to funnel millions through fake charities, with Nia's $50,000 as the seed. Nia's hands shook, flipping through the ledger, matching entries to Claudia's emails. "This ties her to Owen's condos," she said, her voice steel, pointing at a line labeled Bayside Cover. Her idea, her money stolen to build their empire. Vincent's fingers flew across the keyboard, copying the files to a secure drive. "We'll broadcast this," he said, his tone sharp. Nia's lips curled, a predator's grin, as she slipped the drive into her purse next to the ledger. But danger lingered. Claudia's thug was still out there, his shadow lurking. Nia's breath caught as she spotted him through a window, his eyes scanning the crowd. She grabbed Vincent's arm, her nails digging in. "He's watching," she whispered, her voice taut. Vincent's hand covered hers, steadying her. "Stay close." They slipped back into the hall, blending with guests, Nia's gown shimmering despite the tear, her posture defiant. She caught Elise Davenport's eye, Owen's fiancé, her face pale with suspicion. Nia leaned in, her voice low. Your future's built on lies, she said, slipping Elise a note with one damning email printout. Elise's hands trembled, her eyes wide, but she nodded, a spark of alliance forming. Nia's heart raced, her resolve ablaze. The recording, ledger, and emails were her arsenal, undeniable proof of Claudia's crimes. Vincent's lawyer was on standby, ready to leak to the press. Nia's fingers brushed the drive in her purse, her pulse a war cry. Claudia thought she'd silenced her. Owen thought he'd buried her. They were wrong. The wedding's climax loomed, and Nia was ready to step onto the stage, her truth a fire that would burn their world to ash. Your empire's built on my blood. Nia Okoro's voice thundered through the Miami wedding hall, her silver-white gown blazing under the chandeliers, its high slit and off-shoulder design screaming defiance. She stood at the center of the stage, ledger in one hand, USB drive in the other, her sleek hair a dark cascade, eyes burning like coals. The crowd froze, glasses clinking silent, as Owen Brantley's face drained of color, his bride Elise Davenport clutching her bouquet, trembling. Claudia Brantley lunged forward, her heels screeching, voice shrill. Lies, she's nothing. But Nia's hand shot up, silencing her, her jaw locked tight. You stole my 50 grand, Nia spat, her words slicing like knives. You laundered millions through your fake charity. She slammed the ledger onto the podium, pages fluttering, and Vincent Hargrove, at her side, plugged the USB into a projector. Claudia's recorded voice blared. Owen's ex was easy to fleece. Gasps erupted, cameras flashing, as Nia's nails dug into her palm, blood beating, her pulse a war drum. You used my money, my ideas to build Owen's condos, she snarled, pointing at Owen, whose knees buckled. Elise's eyes widened, her voice cracking. Is this true? Owen stammered. Nia, But Nia cut him off, her voice a whip. You signed the transfers. You sold me out. The screen flashed emails, Claudia's orders to hide millions, Nia's $50,000 the seat of their fraud. Claudia's face twisted, her scream piercing. Stop her! But Vincent's arms shielded Nia, his eyes fierce. It's over, he said, his voice steel. Reporters surged forward, phones recording, as guests whispered, their pity for Nia turning to awe. Elise ripped off her ring, hurling it at Owen. You're a liar, she cried, tears streaming. Nia's chest heaved, her lips curling into a predator's grin. She'd stepped from that Maybach convertible, Vincent at her side, and torn their world apart. Claudia's empire crumbled, Owen's facade shattered, and Nia stood tall, her truth a blade that cut through their lies. The crowd roared, their applause a tidal wave, as Nia's heart pounded, her victory sealed. You reaped what you sowed, Nia Okoro's voice rang out, sharp as a blade, as she stood outside the Miami courthouse, her sleek hair catching the flash of reporters' cameras. Claudia Brantley, hands cuffed, face twisted in fury, was led away by police, her charity empire in ruins after Nia's wedding expose. Nia's chest heaved, her jaw locked. The ledger and USB drive, proof of Claudia's money laundering, now in the hands of prosecutors. Owen Brantley, disgraced, shuffled behind, his suit rumpled, eyes hollow. Nia, I'm sorry, he stammered, his voice weak, but Nia's hand shot up, cutting him off. Save it, she snapped, her words venom. Her $50,000 stolen for their lies was ordered repaid, plus damages, by a judge who praised Nia's courage. Claudia's sneer faltered as cameras swarmed, her crime splashed across headlines. Miami charity fraud exposed. Owen's real estate deals collapsed. His Bayside condos, built on Nia's idea, ceased for investigation. Elise Davenport, now free of Owen, stood nearby, her nod to Nia a silent alliance. Nia's pulse hammered, her lips curling into a fierce grin. She'd torn their world apart, her truth a fire that burned through their deceit. Reporters surged, shouting questions, but Nia's eyes stayed fixed, unyielding. Justice is mine, she said, her voice steel as she turned away, her heels clicking. Claudia's empire was dust, Owen's arrogance ash, and every knot of their scheme unraveled. Nia's heart pounded, not with vengeance, but victory. The courthouse steps gleamed behind her, a stage for her triumph, and the world watched, awestruck. You can't erase what you stole, but I'm building something bigger. Nia Okoro's voice roared through the crowded Miami street, her hands gripping a ribbon, scissors poised to cut, as she stood before her new flower shop flagship, its glass doors gleaming with promise. Her sleek, straight hair framed her face, eyes blazing with triumph, her pulse a steady drum of hope. The crowd, locals, reporters, kids from her free flower arranging classes, cheered, their applause a tidal wave. Claudia Brantley's arrest and Owen Brantley's downfall, exposed by Nia's courage at the wedding, had returned her stolen $50,000 plus damages, but Nia wasn't stopping there. Her jaw clenched, her fingers steady. She snipped the ribbon, the crowd erupting as the doors swung open. Elise Davenport, Owen's ex-fiancée, stepped forward, her eyes bright, voice firm. "You deserve this," she said, handing Nia a contract. "I'm investing in your chain." Nia's chest swelled, her lips curling into a fierce grin. Elise, freed from Owen's lies, had redirected her family's wealth to fund Nia's dream, a chain of flower shops across Miami, each a beacon of beauty and community. Vincent Hargrove, at Nia's side, his hand brushing hers, added, "And I'm backing you too." His voice was steel, his eyes gleaming with pride. Nia's heart pounded, her nails digging into her palm, not from pain but purpose. She'd turned her betrayal into a legacy. The shop buzzed, filled with vibrant blooms Nia designed herself, her artistry drawing gasps. She announced a charity fund, seeded with her damages, to teach kids from Miami's poorest neighborhoods flower arranging, giving them skills and hope. "This is for them," Nia declared, her voice a whip, as kids from her classes beamed, clutching bouquets. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashing, as Nia's story, once a tale of betrayal, became Miami's anthem of resilience. Elise grabbed Nia's hand, her grip tight. "You changed me," she said, her voice raw. "I trusted a liar, but you showed me truth." Nia's eyes softened, a spark of alliance flaring. Vincent's lawyer nearby confirmed the fund's launch, ensuring Claudia's victims, including Maya, got restitution. Nia's breath caught, her pulse racing as she handed a rose to a young girl, whose smile mirrored her own. "You'll shine," Nia whispered, her voice steel and silk. The crowd roared again, their voices a chorus of hope as Nia stood tall, her shop a monument to her fight. Owen's theft, Claudia's empire, both ashes now, couldn't dim her fire. She'd built this with her hands, her heart, and Vincent and Elise's belief in her. Her fingers brushed the scissors, still warm, a symbol of cutting through lies. The kids danced around her, their laughter a shield against the past. Nia's heart swelled, her resolve a blade forged anew. This wasn't just a shop, it was a movement, a promise to Miami that beauty could rise from pain. Vincent's hand squeezed hers, his whisper fierce. "You're unstoppable." Nia's grin widened, her eyes locked on the future, a horizon blazing with possibility. "You can't break what's already whole." Nia Okoro's voice soared, her hands gripping a bouquet of lilies as she stood in her Miami flower shop, now a flagship for her thriving chain. Her sleek, straight hair framed her radiant face, eyes blazing with triumph, her pulse a steady drum of joy. The shop buzzed with laughter, kids from her charity classes weaving flowers into crowns, their giggles a shield against her past. Vincent Hargrove, her rock, slipped a ring onto her finger, his eyes fierce with love. "Marry me, Nia," he said, his voice steel, sparking cheers from the crowd. Friends, customers, and Elise Davenport, Owen's ex-fiancée, now Nia's ally. Nia's chest swelled, her lips curling into a fierce grin, as she nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes," she whispered, her voice silk and fire. The room erupted, petals scattering like confetti, as Nia's journey from betrayal to victory crystallized. Her shops dotted Miami, each a beacon of beauty, funded by Elise's investment and Vincent's faith. Her $50,000 restitution, the seed of a new empire. Her charity fund, teaching kids to arrange flowers, had sparked hope across the city, with Maya, the whistleblower, now its manager. Nia's jaw clenched, her fingers brushing the ring. Owen's betrayal, stealing her money, her dreams, a distant scar. She'd faced him one last time, weeks after his downfall, in a quiet park. "I forgive you," she'd said, her voice sharp, "but not for you, for me." Owen's eyes were hollow, his arrogance ash, as he nodded, muttering, "I lost everything." Nia's heels had clicked away, her spine straight, leaving him to his ruins. Now Elise stepped forward, her hand gripping Nia's. "You rebuilt me too," she said, her voice raw, eyes shining. Their friendship, forged in shared truth, was a bridge over Owen's lies. Nia handed a crown to a young girl, her smile mirroring the child's, her heart a war drum of purpose. "Keep creating," she told the kids, her words steel. The shop's shelves overflowed with her designs, each bloom a testament to her resilience. Reporters lingered, their cameras flashing, as Nia's story, once a tale of pain, became Miami's anthem. A local paper hailed her, from betrayal to bloom. Vincent's arm circled her waist, his whisper fierce. "You're my home." Nia's breath caught, her nails digging into her palm, not from pain but pride. She'd turned Claudia's fraud, Owen's theft, into a legacy of beauty and hope. The kids danced, their flower crowns glowing, as Nia's shop became a sanctuary, a symbol of what truth could build. She glanced at a photo on the wall, her grandmother, whose legacy Owen stole, smiling down. Nia's heart swelled, her resolve a blade forged in fire. She wasn't just whole, she was unstoppable. The crowd's cheers rose, a tidal wave, as Nia stood tall, her future blazing brighter than ever. Nia Okoro's fire burned through betrayal, her silver-white gown a beacon of triumph, her Maybach exit a slap to Owen's lies. She didn't just rise, she forged an empire from ashes, her flower shops a testament to resilience, her charity a lifeline for Miami's kids. Claudia's cuffs clinked, Owen's world crumbled, and Nia stood tall, her heart a war drum, her legacy unstoppable. Her journey from a stolen $50,000 to a chain of blooming dreams proves truth cuts deeper than deceit. What sparks did Nia's fight ignite in you? Did her defiance, her predator's grin, make your pulse race? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and how her story hit you. Was it her courage, her refusal to break, that gripped you? Or the way she turned pain into power? Your voice fuels our community, so don't hold back. Share now. We're grateful for every second you spent with us, diving into this tale of grit and glory. Your support lights our fire, pushing us to bring more stories that shake your soul. Hit that subscribe button, join the fight for truth, and stay tuned for our next chapter. Nia's victory is yours too. Let's meet again soon, ready to conquer the next story. Low-class trash doesn't belong here. Richard Vance's voice sliced through the Metropolis Arts Gala at the Plaza, New York, under shimmering LED lights. Dr. Serena Williams, a black architect, stood radiant, her sleek, wavy hair cascading like a crown, her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, off-shoulder, V-neck, adorned with silver lace, flowing like a galaxy. Beside her, billionaire Alexander Sterling's admiring gaze lingered until a call pulled him away. Richard, arm in arm with model Tiffany Harlow, sneered, "A black girl from Brooklyn fits this gala? Know your place." Tiffany cackled. Serena, unflinching, retorted, "My place is where I stand." The crowd froze. A bang! The doors swung open. Alexander strode in, black Tom Ford suit, eyes blazing. Who is he? What retribution awaits Richard? Will Serena's triumph reshape the night? The Metropolis Arts Gala pulsed with opulence, its grandeur unfolding beneath the sleek glow of LED lights in the plaza's grand ballroom. Polished oak floors reflected the swirl of satin gowns, while violins wove a delicate melody through the chatter of New York's elite. Dr. Serena Williams glided through the crowd, a vision of defiance and grace. Her sleek, wavy hair cascaded like a midnight tide, framing her radiant brown skin. The ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, off-shoulder with a daring V-neck, adorned with intricate silver lace, clung to her curves before spilling into a flowing train, a shimmering galaxy trailing her every step. Designed with her input, it was more than fashion. It was armor, a testament to her brilliance as an architect who reshaped skylines with purpose. Beside her, Alexander Sterling moved with quiet authority, his black Tom Ford suit tailored to perfection, a Patek Philippe watch catching the light. A billionaire investor known for his reclusive genius, his presence was a subtle force, his warm gaze fixed on Serena. Their hands brushed, a silent vow amid the clamor. They were here for the gala's cause, a community library in Harlem, Serena's brainchild, set to break ground with tonight's funds. Her designs, rooted in sustainability and inclusion, had earned her accolades. But this project was personal, a beacon for kids like the ones she'd grown up with in Brooklyn. Serena's fingers tightened on Alexander's arm as they approached the bar, her eyes scanning the room. The air carried a faint chill, not from the temperature, but from the weight of unseen judgments. She'd felt it before, those sidelong glances from the elite, their smiles polite but sharp, as if her presence required explanation. A memory flickered, her mother's voice humming "Ain't No Way" by Aretha Franklin, a soulful anthem of resilience that had carried Serena through countless nights of doubt. She straightened, her gown shimmering like a shield, her wavy hair a crown of pride. "You're tense," Alexander murmured, his voice a low rumble, his hand covering hers. "This library, it's your legacy, Serena. No one in this room can touch that." His eyes, deep and steady, held hers, grounding her. "Your designs will outlast their whispers." She smiled, her heart easing. "You always know what to say," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "This project, it's for the kids who need a place to dream, like I did." Her gaze drifted to a display of her library model across the room. Sleek lines, glass walls, a space where Harlem's youth could soar. Alexander followed her eyes, pride flickering in his expression. "You're not just building libraries," he said, leaning closer, his breath warm against her ear. "You're building futures. I'm damn proud to stand beside you." Serena's lips curved, but a prickle of unease stirred. The room felt too still, like the calm before a storm. She sipped her champagne, the bubbles sharp on her tongue, and scanned the crowd again. That's when she saw him. Richard Vance, her ex-husband, striding through the entrance, his arm hooked around Tiffany Harlow, a model whose Instagram fame thrived on curated excess. Richard's tailored tuxedo couldn't mask his hollow arrogance, his smirk as sharp as ever. Tiffany, in a gaudy Versace gown, clutched a diamond choker, her eyes darting for attention. Serena's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the glass. Richard hadn't seen her yet, but the sight of him unearthed a buried ache. Years ago, he'd chipped away at her spirit, dismissing her awards as diversity wins, mocking her Brooklyn roots as grit beneath her nails. He'd once forced her to abandon a school designed for underprivileged kids, sneering, "Stick to projects that impress my clients, not your charity cases." The memory stung, but Serena's jaw set firm. She wasn't that woman anymore. Across the room, Eleanor Vance Astor, the gala's matriarch and chair of the Arts Foundation, observed from a velvet-lined alcove. Her silver hair gleamed, her presence commanding silence without effort. Her eyes narrowed slightly at Richard's entrance, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. She'd crossed paths with Vance Corporation before. Its shoddy bids on her foundation's projects had left a sour taste. Serena caught Eleanor's glance, a silent acknowledgement that felt like an ally in waiting. "Let's move to the exhibit," Serena suggested, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. She tugged Alexander toward the library model, hoping to evade the storm brewing in Richard's smug grin. But his eyes found hers across the crowd, locking on with predatory glee. Tiffany whispered something, her laugh a sharp trill, and they began to weave through the guests, closing the distance. Serena's heart raced, but her posture remained regal, her gown catching the light like a beacon. She was no longer the woman who shrank to fit Richard's world. Yet as Alexander's phone buzzed with an urgent call, he squeezed her hand. "I'll be right back," he said, his voice a promise, his lips brushing her temple before he stepped toward the lobby. Alone, Serena stood by the exhibit, her fingers tracing the model's glass curves. The crowd's murmurs felt sharper now, their eyes like pinpricks. She was a black woman in a sea of privilege, her brilliance both a crown and a target. Richard and Tiffany were closer now, their steps deliberate, their smiles venomous. What poison would they unleash? Could Serena's newfound strength withstand their cruelty? And what power did Alexander hold, waiting just beyond the gala's gilded doors? Serena Williams stood by the library exhibit, her fingers grazing the sleek glass curves of the model, a miniature vision of her Harlem dream. The Metropolis Arts Gala hummed around her, violins weaving through the clink of champagne flutes. But the air felt heavier now, charged with an unseen threat. Her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown shimmered under the LED lights, its flowing train pooling like starlight, a quiet defiance against the room's prying eyes. Her sleek, wavy hair brushed her bare shoulders, each strand a testament to the pride she'd reclaimed after years of erasure. Yet as Richard Vance and Tiffany Harlow drew closer, their steps deliberate, Serena's heart thudded, a drumbeat echoing old wounds. She hadn't seen Richard in years, but his smirk, sharp as a blade, cut through the distance. Tiffany, her diamond choker glinting like a trophy, tossed her head, her Versace gown a gaudy contrast to Serena's elegant design. They moved through the crowd like predators, their eyes locked on her. Serena's breath hitched, but she steadied herself, her posture unyielding. She wasn't the woman who once dimmed her light for Richard's approval. Still, memories clawed at her, unbidden and raw. Years ago, in their Upper West Side penthouse, Richard had sculpted her into a shadow of herself. When she won her first architectural award, he'd laughed at a dinner party, his voice dripping with condescension. She got lucky. Diversity quotas, you know. Guests had chuckled and Serena had forced a smile, her heart splintering. Another night, she'd pitched a pro bono school design for Brooklyn kids, her voice alive with passion. Richard had scoffed. "Stick to projects that impress my clients, and Serena. Charity doesn't pay for our lifestyle." She'd abandoned the project, her dreams folded into his beige expectations, her vibrant spirit muted to fit his world. Now standing by her library model, a beacon for Harlem's youth, Serena felt the weight of those years lift, only to be replaced by a new dread. Richard's presence wasn't chance. It was a calculated strike. She glanced at the model, its glass walls symbolizing the futures she was building, and whispered to herself, "You're not that girl anymore." The words echoed her mother's voice, singing "Ain't No Way" in their Brooklyn kitchen, a soulful shield against a world that tried to break them. Across the room, Eleanor Vance Astor watched from her alcove, her silver hair catching the light like a crown. The gala's matriarch, her gaze carried the weight of old money and sharper judgment. She'd clashed with Richard's company before, his shoddy bids failing her foundation standards. Her eyes flicked to Serena, a spark of recognition passing between them, as if Eleanor sensed the storm brewing. Serena caught the glance, a fleeting anchor in the sea of whispers, but her focus snapped back as Richard and Tiffany closed in, their smiles venomous. Tiffany tilted her head, her choker glinting as she adjusted it, a blatant bid for attention. "Serena Williams," she drawled, her voice a syrupy taunt, loud enough to draw nearby glances. "Still chasing the spotlight, huh?" Richard's laugh was low, cruel. "She always did love playing dress-up in places she didn't belong," he said, his eyes raking over Serena's gown, dismissing its artistry. The crowd nearby shifted, their murmurs sharpening, sensing a spectacle. Serena's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "I'm here for the library, Richard. Something you'd never understand. Building for others." Her words were a quiet blade, slicing through his bravado. Tiffany's smile faltered, her fingers twitching on her choker, but Richard's smirk widened, unfazed. He stepped closer, his presence invasive, his cologne a bitter reminder of nights spent shrinking under his gaze. "You think a fancy dress and a few awards make you one of us?" he said, voice low but cutting, meant to wound without witnesses. "Brooklyn grit doesn't wash off, Serena." The insult landed like a slap, echoing the nights he'd mocked her roots, her dreams, her very existence. Serena's hand tightened on the exhibit's edge, but her eyes burned with defiance. She was no longer his to diminish. Eleanor's gaze sharpened from her alcove, her lips thinning as she caught Richard's words. A few guests nearby leaned in, their curiosity piqued, but Serena held her ground, her gown catching the light like a beacon of resilience. She could feel the room tilting, the air thick with anticipation. Richard and Tiffany were circling, ready to strike, but something in Serena's stance, a fire forged in pain and pride, kept them wary. Alexander was still absent, his call holding him in the lobby. Serena's heart ached for his steady presence, but she didn't need saving. She was her own anchor now, her mother's song echoing in her veins. Yet as Richard's eyes gleamed with malice and Tiffany's laugh trilled again, a chill ran through her. What venom would they unleash next? Could her strength withstand their cruelty? And what power did Alexander carry, lingering just beyond the gala's gilded doors, ready to shift the night's fate? Serena Williams stood by the library exhibit, its glass curves gleaming under the LED lights, a silent promise of hope for Harlem's youth. The Metropolis Arts Gala swirled around her, violins humming, champagne flutes clinking, but the air pressed against her like a tightening vice. Her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, its V-neck and silver lace catching the light like a distant star, draped her in quiet defiance. Her sleek, wavy hair brushed her bare shoulders, each strand a reminder of the pride she'd fought to reclaim. Yet with Alexander still held up by his call in the lobby, Serena felt like a lone island in a sea of privilege, the crowd's murmurs sharpening into pinpricks of scrutiny. Richard Vance and Tiffany Harlow were closer now, their steps deliberate, their eyes glinting with predatory intent. Richard's smirk was a blade, honed by years of cutting her down. Tiffany, her diamond choker flashing as she tossed her head, radiated a performative confidence, her Versace gown a loud bid for dominance. Serena's fingers tightened on the exhibit's edge, her heart pounding, but her posture remained unyielding. She wasn't the woman who once shrank under Richard's gaze, yet the weight of his presence stirred a familiar ache, a ghost of the past she'd buried. A memory flickered, unbidden. A gala years ago, Richard at her side, his hand gripping hers too tightly as he whispered, "Smile, Serena. Don't embarrass me with your Brooklyn attitude." She'd forced a laugh, her spirit folding under his command, her dreams tucked away to appease his elite circle. That night a guest had praised her early designs, and Richard had cut in. "She's still learning. Lucky to have me to guide her." The dismissal had stung, a quiet theft of her brilliance. Now standing by her Harlem library model, Serena felt that old wound pulse. But it was no longer a chain. It was fuel. She glanced across the room, catching Eleanor Vance Astor's gaze. The matriarch stood in her alcove, her silver hair a beacon of authority, her eyes narrowing as they followed Richard's approach. Eleanor had rejected Vance Corporation's bids before. Her foundation had been burned by their incompetence. Her glance at Serena held a flicker of solidarity, as if she sensed the storm gathering. It was a fleeting anchor, but Serena's focus snapped back as Tiffany's voice cut through the hum of the gala. "Look at her playing architect in that dress," Tiffany said, her tone loud enough to draw nearby heads, her choker glinting as she leaned into Richard. "Bet she thinks it makes her one of us." Her laugh was a sharp trill, designed to wound. Richard's eyes locked on Serena, his smile curling with malice. "She's always been good at pretending," he said, his voice carrying just enough to prick the ears of those nearby. The crowd shifted, their curiosity a palpable weight, sensing a spectacle brewing. Serena's breath caught, but her voice held steady. "I'm here for the library, Tiffany," she said, her words crisp, cutting through the taunt. "It's about building futures, not chasing your kind of spotlight." The jab landed, and Tiffany's smile faltered, her fingers twitching on her choker, as if its sparkle could shield her. Richard's smirk didn't waver, his confidence unshaken, his cologne, a bitter echo of their past, closing the gap as he stepped nearer. "You think a few blueprints and a fancy gown erase where you come from?" he murmured, his voice low, meant to sting without witnesses. "Brooklyn's still in your bones, Serena." The words were a venomous echo of years spent belittling her roots, her talent, her very existence. Serena's hand trembled slightly, but her eyes burned with a fire forged in pain. She was no longer his to break, yet the room's gaze felt like a spotlight, exposing her to judgment. Eleanor's eyes sharpened from her alcove, her lips thinning as she caught Richard's taunt. A few guests nearby leaned closer, their whispers growing bolder, drawn to the tension like moths to flame. Serena stood tall, her gown a shimmering testament to her strength, her wavy hair a quiet crown of resilience. She could hear her mother's voice in her mind, singing, "Ain't No Way," a soulful anthem that had carried her through darker nights than this. It steadied her, a reminder of the legacy she carried, the pride she'd reclaimed. Alexander's absence stretched like a void, his steady presence a warmth she craved. But Serena didn't need saving. She was her own fortress now. Still, as Richard and Tiffany circled closer, their eyes gleaming with intent, a chill ran through her. The gala's opulence faded, the violins a distant hum, the crowd's gaze a tightening noose. What cruelty would Richard unleash next? Could Serena's fire withstand his venom? And what force did Alexander carry, waiting just beyond the gala's doors, ready to shatter the night's fragile balance? Serena Williams stood resolute by the library exhibit, its glass curves a silent testament to her vision for Harlem's youth. The Metropolis Arts Gala pulsed around her, violins fading into a distant hum, the crowd's murmurs sharpening into a predatory buzz. Her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, with its V-neck and silver lace catching the LED lights like a defiant flame, draped her in unyielding grace. Her sleek, wavy hair framed her face, a cascade of resilience against the storm brewing before her. Richard Vance and Tiffany Harlow stood mere steps away, their eyes glinting with malice, ready to strike. Alexander's absence in the lobby stretched like a chasm, but Serena's heart beat steady, anchored by the fire she'd forged through years of pain. Richard's smirk curled tighter, his voice a low, venomous hiss. "Still playing the part, Serena?" he said, loud enough to draw nearby gazes. "A black girl from Brooklyn thinks she can waltz into our world?" Tiffany's laugh was sharp, her diamond choker flashing as she tossed her head. "That dress," she sneered, her words carrying across the sala. "It's cute, but it screams knockoff. Did you borrow it from a thrift shop?" The jab landed, and a few guests tittered, their eyes darting to Serena's gown, its shimmering train a stark contrast to Tiffany's gaudy Versace. Serena's fingers tightened on the exhibit's edge, but her posture remained regal, her brown eyes unflinching. "The dress is mine, Tiffany," she said, her voice clear, slicing through the taunt. "Designed with my vision, unlike your borrowed shine." The crowd murmured, some nodding at her poise, but Richard's laugh cut through, cold and deliberate. He stepped closer, his cologne a bitter echo of their past, and grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to sting. "Don't get cocky," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This gala is for people with pedigree, not pretenders like you." The air thickened, the crowd's whispers growing louder. Eleanor Vance Astor, watching from her alcove, stiffened, her silver hair catching the light as her lips thinned in disapproval. Her foundation had rejected Vance Corporation's bids for good reason. Richard's arrogance was as shoddy as his work. Her gaze locked on Serena, a silent signal of alliance. But Serena was alone in this moment, the weight of Richard's words pressing against her. He released her wrist, stepping back to amplify his voice, ensuring every guest heard. "Listen up," he bellowed, his tone a mix of scorn and spectacle. "This low-class wannabe thinks she belongs here. A black girl from the streets, playing dress-up in a world built for us." Tiffany cackled, her choker glinting as she clapped, egging him on. "Know your place, Serena," she chimed, her voice dripping with mockery. The sala fell silent, the violins fading, every eye on Serena, waiting for her to crumble under the weight of their prejudice. But Serena didn't falter. She stepped forward, her gown's train sweeping like a comet's tail, her wavy hair catching the light like a halo of defiance. "My place?" she said, her voice ringing clear, each word a blade. "My place is where I build futures, Richard. Unlike you, who builds nothing but lies." The crowd gasped, some leaning forward, captivated by her fire. Tiffany's smile froze, her fingers clutching her choker, as if its sparkle could shield her from Serena's truth. Richard's face reddened, his smirk twisting into a snarl, ready to unleash another barb. Serena's heart pounded, but her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Ain't no way," a soulful anthem of unyielding strength, sung in their Brooklyn kitchen to defy a world that tried to break them. It steadied her, a reminder of the legacy she carried, the pride she'd reclaimed. She stood taller, her gown a radiant shield, her eyes burning with a fire Richard could never extinguish. The crowd's gaze shifted, some with admiration, others with unease, sensing the tide turning. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her disapproval of Richard now unmistakable. A few guests whispered, their words a mix of shock and intrigue, drawn to Serena's unyielding presence. But Richard wasn't done. He stepped closer, his voice a venomous growl. "You'll never be one of us, Serena. You're nothing but Brooklyn dirt in a shiny dress." The insult landed like a slap, echoing the nights he'd belittled her dreams, her roots, her very being. Tiffany's laugh rang out again, a cruel crescendo, as the sala held its breath, waiting for Serena's next move. Alexander was still in the lobby, his call holding him from her side. Serena felt the void of his presence, but she didn't need saving. She was her own fortress. Yet as Richard's eyes gleamed with triumph and Tiffany's taunts echoed, a chill ran through her. How far would their cruelty go? Could her fire withstand their venom? And what force was Alexander bringing, just beyond the gala's doors, ready to shatter this moment of malice? Richard Vance's voice thundered across the sala, a venomous crescendo that silenced the violin's hum. "This low-class black girl from Brooklyn thinks she belongs here," he bellowed, his words a blade aimed at Serena Williams' heart, drawing every eye in the plaza's grand ballroom. Tiffany Harlow's laugh was a piercing echo, her diamond choker glinting as she clapped, her Versace gown a garish contrast to Serena's elegance. The LED lights cast a radiant glow on Serena's ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, its off-shoulder V-neck and silver lace shimmering like a warrior's armor, its flowing train a defiant banner. Her sleek, wavy hair framed her face, each strand a quiet rebellion, her brown skin glowing with unyielding pride. The crowd held its breath, waiting for her to break. But Serena didn't crumble. She stepped forward, freeing her wrist from Richard's lingering grip, her eyes blazing with a fire forged in years of resilience. "Richard," she said, her voice clear as a bell, cutting through the sala's stunned silence. "Your measure of worth is skin and money. That's the true mark of a low-class soul." The words landed like a whip, sharp and precise, and the crowd gasped, some nodding in quiet admiration. Tiffany's smile froze, her fingers clutching her choker, its sparkle now a hollow shield. Richard's face flushed crimson, his smirk twisting into a snarl, ready to unleash another barb. "You're nothing but dirt in a shiny dress," he spat, his voice loud enough to echo off the walls, drawing more onlookers. "This gala is for pedigree, not pretenders like you," Tiffany chimed in, her tone dripping venom. "Know your place, Serena. Brooklyn trash stays on the streets." The insults, raw with prejudice, hung heavy in the air, a public crucifixion meant to shatter her. Eleanor Vance Astor, watching from her alcove, stiffened, her silver hair catching the light as her eyes narrowed with unmistakable disdain. She'd seen Richard's kind before, arrogant, hollow, and doomed to fall. Serena stood taller, her gown's train sweeping like a comet's arc, her wavy hair a cascade of defiance under the LED glow. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, singing, "Ain't No Way," a soulful anthem of unbreakable spirit from their Brooklyn kitchen. It anchored her, a reminder of the legacy she carried. "My place," she said, her voice steady, resonant, "is where I build futures, Richard. You'd never understand that, because you've built nothing but lies." The crowd murmured, some faces softening with respect, others shifting uncomfortably, caught in the gravity of her words. Tiffany's laugh faltered, her fingers trembling on her choker, as if its dazzle couldn't mask her unease. Richard stepped closer, his eyes glinting with rage, ready to escalate the assault. "You think a few blueprints make you somebody?" he sneered, his voice a low growl meant to wound. "You'll always be an outsider, Serena, no matter how you dress it up." The words were a dagger, echoing the nights he'd dismissed her dreams, her roots, her very existence. The sala was a cauldron now, the tension thick, the crowd's whispers a rising tide of anticipation. Eleanor's gaze sharpened, her disapproval of Richard a silent thunder. A few guests leaned forward, their eyes darting between Serena's unyielding stance and Richard's growing desperation. Serena's heart pounded, but her spirit was a fortress, built from the ashes of her past. She could still hear her mother's song, its notes weaving through her veins, a shield against the venom. Alexander's absence was a void, his steady presence a warmth she craved, but she didn't need saving. She was her own beacon, her gown a radiant testament to her strength, her hair a quiet crown of pride. The crowd's gaze was a spotlight, both cruel and curious, but Serena met it head-on, her eyes burning with a fire Richard could never extinguish. Richard opened his mouth, another insult forming, but the air shifted. A resounding bang shattered the silence, the heavy doors of the sala swinging open with force. Alexander Sterling strode in, his black Tom Ford suit cutting a sharp silhouette, his Patek Philippe watch catching the light like a warning. His eyes, sharp as steel, swept the room, locking onto Serena with a fierce protectiveness before turning to Richard with a gaze that promised reckoning. The crowd parted, the violins stilled, and the sala held its breath. Who was this man whose presence turned the air electric? What power did he wield to make Richard's arrogance falter? And what retribution would he unleash for the woman who stood unbowed, her gown a blazing emblem of defiance, her heart a legacy of unbreakable strength? Alexander Sterling's presence filled the sala like a gathering storm, his black Tom Ford suit a sharp silhouette against the LED glow. The crowd at the plaza stood frozen, violins silenced, as his steely gaze locked onto Serena Williams, standing unbowed by the library exhibit. Her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, its V-neck and silver lace shimmering like a beacon, draped her in radiant defiance, its flowing train a silent testament to her strength. Her sleek, wavy hair caught the light, framing her brown skin with a glow that outshone the room's opulence. Alexander moved to her side, his hand brushing her cheek with a tenderness that belied the fire in his eyes. "You okay?" he murmured, his voice a low anchor. Serena nodded, her eyes steady, her heart fortified by the soulful echo of "Ain't No Way," the anthem her mother sang to defy a world that tried to break them. Only then did Alexander turn to Richard Vance, whose smirk had withered into a pale mask of unease. Tiffany Harlow, clutching her diamond choker, stood rigid, her Versace gown a garish mockery of Serena's elegance. The crowd leaned in, sensing a reckoning. "Vance," Alexander said, his voice cold as steel, cutting through the sala's hush. "You dare speak of class when your company is drowning in debt, teetering on bankruptcy?" Gasps rippled through the guests, their eyes darting to Richard, whose face drained of color. "I know," Alexander continued, "because my investment firm holds your loans. Every cent you can't repay." Richard's jaw tightened, his arrogance crumbling. Tiffany's fingers trembled on her choker, her eyes wide with panic. Alexander's gaze didn't waver. "You begged me for a bailout at a Hampton soiree last summer," he said, his words a blade, "pleading for mercy to save Vance Corporation, but Serena advised against it. She saw your failure long before you did, while you were busy belittling her." The crowd erupted in murmurs, heads turning to Serena, whose poise was a quiet thunder. Richard staggered, as if the floor had shifted beneath him. "That's a lie," he stammered, but his voice cracked, betraying his desperation. Serena's eyes met his, unflinching, her gown catching the light like a warrior's standard. She'd warned Alexander of Richard's mismanagement, his inflated bids and hollow promises, months ago. Her foresight had been her silent victory, now laid bare. Alexander pulled out his phone, his movements deliberate. "Michael," he said, his voice carrying, "activate the foreclosure clause on Vance Corporation's loans. No negotiations. Now." He ended the call with a click, his eyes piercing Richard. "Welcome to the unemployment line," he said, each word a hammer striking Richard's crumbling empire. The crowd gasped, some clutching their pearls, others whispering in shock. Richard's face was ashen, his hands trembling, his world unraveling in front of New York's elite. Alexander turned to Tiffany, whose bravado had evaporated. "Miss Harlow," he said, his tone icy, "that Versace gown you're flaunting? It's from a brand where I hold a controlling stake. Consider your modeling contracts canceled. No designer tied to me will touch you again." Tiffany's gasp was audible, her choker now a noose around her neck. She stepped back, her eyes darting for an escape, but the crowd's gaze pinned her in place. Eleanor Vance Astor, watching from her alcove, nodded slightly, her silver hair gleaming as she acknowledged Serena's strength. Her disapproval of Richard had been vindicated, her foundation burned by his incompetence years ago. The sala was a cauldron of whispers now, the air electric with the weight of Alexander's words. Serena stood beside him, her wavy hair a cascade of quiet power, her gown a radiant emblem of her triumph. She hadn't spoken, but her presence was a force, commanding the room without effort. Alexander faced the crowd, his hand resting on Serena's shoulder, a gesture of partnership, not possession. "This woman," he declared, his voice ringing clear, "with her intellect, talent, and dignity, is worth more than any legacy your family ever claimed, Vance. She doesn't just belong here, she makes this place worthy. She is my queen." The words echoed, a proclamation that shifted the room's gravity. Guests murmured in awe, some clapping softly, others staring at Serena with newfound respect. Serena met Alexander's gaze, her heart swelling with a love that didn't demand she shrink. The echo of "Ain't No Way" pulsed in her veins, a reminder of her mother's strength, her Brooklyn roots, her unbreakable spirit. Richard stood frozen, a hollow shell, while Tiffany's eyes darted, seeking a way to salvage her crumbling facade. The crowd's attention was on Serena now, her gown a shimmering testament to her resilience, her presence a beacon of power. What would become of Richard and Tiffany, now stripped of their arrogance? How would the gala's elite react to Serena's ascendance? And what final act would cement her victory as the night's drama unfolded under the unforgiving light of truth? The sala at the plaza stood frozen, the air crackling with the aftershock of Alexander Sterling's words. Serena Williams, radiant beside him, was a vision of unyielding strength, her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown shimmering under the LED lights like a flame that refused to dim. Its off-shoulder V-neck and silver lace framed her with quiet majesty, the flowing train a silent proclamation of her triumph. Her sleek, wavy hair fell in soft waves, catching the light like a crown forged in resilience, her brown skin glowing with a defiance that outshone the room. Richard Vance, his face ashen, stood like a man whose world had crumbled, his tuxedo a hollow shell of his former arrogance. Tiffany Harlow, her diamond choker now a weight around her neck, trembled, her Versace gown a fading echo of her bravado. Tiffany's voice broke the silence, a desperate stammer. I didn't know who he was," she blurted, stepping back from Richard, her eyes darting for an escape. "This wasn't my idea." Her words were a feeble shield, her choker glinting mockingly as she stumbled toward the crowd, only to find cold stares instead of sympathy. The guests, once drawn to her performative charm, now turned away, their whispers sharp with judgment. Richard didn't move, his hands clenched, his gaze fixed on the floor as if it could swallow his humiliation. "Get him out," Alexander said softly to a nearby security guard, his voice calm but final. Two guards in crisp suits approached, their steps measured, and escorted Richard toward the exit, his head bowed, a fallen king stripped of his crown. The crowd parted, their murmurs swelling into a tide of awe and intrigue. Serena stood still, her heart pounding but her posture unwavering, her gown a radiant testament to her victory. She felt the echo of her mother's voice, singing "Ain't No Way" in their Brooklyn kitchen, a soulful anthem that had taught her to stand tall against a world that tried to break her. Alexander's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a gesture of partnership, not possession, his warmth a steady anchor in the storm's aftermath. Eleanor Vance Astor emerged from her alcove, her silver hair gleaming like a beacon of authority, her presence commanding the room's attention. The matriarch of the Metropolis Arts Foundation, her disapproval of Richard had been evident from the start. His company's failed bids had insulted her standards years ago. She stepped toward Serena, her eyes sharp but warm, a rare smile softening her features. "Dr. Williams," she said, her voice resonating with gravitas, "your composure tonight is a masterclass in dignity. I've watched Vance's arrogance fester for years, but your strength exposes it for what it is: empty." The crowd leaned in, hanging on her words. Eleanor continued, "Your Harlem library is a masterpiece, a beacon for a generation. I knew your work was exceptional when we selected you as an advisor, but tonight I see your true power." She paused, her gaze sweeping the sala. "The foundation will double its funding for your project, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the guests, followed by a wave of applause, tentative at first, then thunderous. Serena's eyes glistened, not with tears of weakness, but with the weight of a victory earned through years of resilience. Serena inclined her head, her voice steady. "Thank you, Mrs. Astor," she said, her words carrying a quiet strength. "This library is for every child who dares to dream beyond their circumstances." The applause grew louder, the crowd's admiration shifting from curiosity to reverence. Her gown caught the light like a star ascending, its silver lace a delicate armor, her wavy hair a cascade of pride. Alexander's eyes met hers, a silent vow of unwavering support, his pride in her palpable. Tiffany, now a ghost in the crowd, slipped toward the exit, her choker a mocking reminder of her fall. The guests' whispers followed her, their disdain a mirror to her own cruelty. Richard, escorted out, was already a fading memory, his empire reduced to ashes in a single night. The Sala's energy had shifted, orbiting Serena now, her presence a force that reshaped the night's narrative. Alexander took her hand, his touch a grounding warmth. "Shall we?" he murmured, his voice soft but resonant. Serena nodded, her smile radiant, her heart buoyed by the soulful strength of her roots. They moved toward the exit, her gown's train sweeping like a comet's tail, drawing every eye. The crowd parted, their applause a lingering echo, their gazes filled with awe. Serena wasn't just a guest. She was a queen, her triumph etched in every step. As they approached the doors, the violins resumed, a haunting melody that seemed to mourn Richard's fall and celebrate Serena's rise. The night wasn't over, but its verdict was clear. What would the world say when news of this moment spread? How would Serena's victory ripple beyond these walls? And what legacy would her strength forge in the hearts of those who witnessed her stand? Serena Williams stepped out of the plaza into the cool Manhattan night, the echo of applause fading behind her. Alexander Sterling's hand was warm in hers, a steady anchor as they left the Metropolis Arts Gala's gilded chaos. Her ombre blue-silver mermaid gown, its off-shoulder V-neck and silver lace catching the city's neon glow, flowed like a river of starlight, its train a quiet testament to her triumph. Her sleek, wavy hair brushed her shoulders, each strand a whisper of the pride she'd reclaimed, her brown skin radiant under the streetlights. The weight of Richard Vance's venom, Tiffany Harlow's cruelty, and the gala's judgmental gazes had dissolved, replaced by a lightness Serena hadn't felt in years. They paused by their car, the city's pulse humming around them, taxis honking, skyscrapers looming, a distant siren weaving through the night. Serena's heart was steady, her mind replaying the gala's turning tide. Richard's ashen face, Tiffany's desperate retreat, Eleanor Vance Astor's resounding endorsement. But it was the echo of her mother's voice, singing Ain't No Way in their Brooklyn kitchen, that grounded her now. That soulful anthem, passed down through generations, had taught her to stand tall against a world that tried to dim her light. Tonight, she hadn't just stood, she'd shone. "You were unstoppable," Alexander said, his voice low, his eyes tracing her face with unwavering admiration. He leaned against the car, his black Tom Ford suit sharp against the night, his Patek Philippe watch glinting faintly. "That library, your vision, it's going to change lives." Serena smiled, her heart swelling. "It's not just the library," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her roots. "It's about showing kids in Harlem they can dream bigger than the world tells them to." Alexander nodded, his gaze deep. "And you showed everyone in that room what true strength looks like." He pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple, a gesture of partnership that didn't demand she shrink. Serena leaned into him, her gown's lace catching the light like a constellation, her wavy hair a soft cascade of defiance. She wasn't the woman Richard had tried to break, nor the one Tiffany had mocked. She was Dr. Serena Williams, architect of futures, daughter of Brooklyn, bearer of a legacy forged in soul and steel. Back in their Manhattan penthouse, sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the room in a golden warmth. Serena sat at the kitchen island, her silk robe loose, her wavy hair falling free, a quiet echo of the gala's fire. She sipped coffee, its bitterness a grounding contrast to the sweetness of her triumph. Alexander joined her, his casual sweater a stark shift from his gala suit, his presence as steady as ever. "What's next for Harlem?" he asked, his voice sparking her vision. "The cultural center," she replied, her eyes alight. "A space where art and history meet, where kids can see themselves as creators." He grinned, sliding a tablet toward her. "I booked us a trip to Kyoto. Japanese architecture for your inspiration. We leave next month." Serena laughed, her heart lifting, the promise of new horizons, a gift only he could give without overshadowing her. She opened her laptop, her fingers pausing as an email notification flashed. It was from Aisha, a young black intern in her Harlem program, her words raw and heartfelt. "Dr. Williams, I saw the gala post on Instagram. You stood up to those people, and it made me believe I can too. I want to be an architect, build places where we're seen. Thank you." Serena's eyes glistened, not with sorrow but with purpose. Aisha's words were a mirror, reflecting the girl Serena had been in Brooklyn, dreaming beyond the world's limits. She could still hear her mother's voice. "Ain't no way." Its notes a lifeline through every storm. That song, that legacy, was woven into every blueprint she drew, every space she created for kids like Aisha to rise. She typed a reply, her words steady. "Aisha, you're already building. Keep dreaming big." Before the mirror in their bedroom, Serena stood, her reflection no longer a battleground. She saw Dr. Serena Williams, a black woman who'd faced venom and emerged a queen. Her wavy hair framed her face like a quiet crown, her strength a legacy etched in her blood. Alexander stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes meeting hers in the glass. "You've always been this," he said, his voice soft but certain. "The world's just catching up." Serena smiled, her heart full. Her victory wasn't Richard's ruin or Tiffany's fall. It was the future she was building, the lives she was touching. The gala's aftermath rippled outward. The Foundation's Instagram post praising her Harlem library went viral, amassing thousands of likes. Richard faced bankruptcy, his company crumbling under foreclosure. Tiffany's modeling contracts vanished, her social media silenced by shame. But Serena looked forward, her designs shaping Harlem, her story inspiring a generation. What would Aisha build with Serena's inspiration? How would Serena's legacy reshape the city's skyline? And what new dreams would she and Alexander forge, hand in hand, in a world they were making brighter? Thank you for walking with Serena through her triumph, a journey of resilience and unbreakable pride. Her story isn't just about overcoming venom. It's about forging a legacy that lights the way for others. Have you ever stood tall in a room that tried to shrink you? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters. Let's keep building spaces where every dream can soar. Until our next tale, stay bold, stay true, and know your strength is a beacon. See you soon. Your Black women's charity dreams belong here, Zola. Julian Croft's venomous jab ignites Blackwood's Grand Hall, slashing at Zola Vance, a black woman radiant in a royal blue gown that flares like wildfire. The chandelier's glow wavers. Elites in tuxedos and shimmering dresses freeze, some sneering, others uneasy, craving her collapse. Zola's eyes, twin flames of defiance, scorch Julian, her silence a roaring blaze that rattles the room. He, arm entwined with Blair's cold grace, laughs, certain he's broken her. But the oak doors at the hall's end thunder open, admitting Kalin Shaw, Zola's billionaire husband. What power will he wield to crush Julian's scorn? Will Zola's fire burn away their past? How will this night redefine their world? One ember sparks, ready to unleash an inferno. "She's fooling the world with her black empowerment nonsense," Julian Croft's voice snarled through the sleek Manhattan penthouse, his fingers crumpling a Forbes magazine as he glared at Blair, her icy blonde hair catching the city's neon glow. The cover blazed with Zola Vance's face, her eyes fierce under the headline, "Redefining Leadership? Innovate Forward's Global Impact." Julian tossed the magazine onto a glass table, its thud echoing like a challenge. She's playing the charity card, Blair, but I'll burn her down at Blackwood. Across the country, in a San Francisco office pulsing with ambition, Zola Vance leaned over a desk cluttered with reports and coffee mugs, her team's cheers still ringing from a $500 million deal with an international foundation. Innovate Forward, her nonprofit, had just secured funding to train another million women of color for global leadership roles. Screens around her flared with metrics. 1.5 million women empowered, $3 billion in education investments. Her royal blue blazer, tailored sharply, mirrored the gown she'd wear to Blackwood, a silent vow to stand unbowed. Yet as her assistant slid a cream-colored envelope across the desk, Blackwood Academy's gold-embossed seal glinting like a taunt, her breath caught. The past flickered, unbidden. Years ago, Julian's voice had cut deeper than any blade. Education for women? Wall Street doesn't care about your dreams, Zola, he'd sneered in their shared apartment, his cufflinks glinting as he adjusted his tie. Blair gets it. Power is money, not ideals. Zola had been a double major at Blackwood, sociology and global studies. Her passion for equity was dismissed as cute by Julian's Wall Street crowd. His indifference had eroded her. Each critique, her bold ideas, her natural curls, her unapologetic blackness, stoking a quiet fire she hadn't yet learned to wield. Their divorce was civil, a cold agreement, but his final words lingered. You'll fade, Zola. You're not built for the real world. Now that world was hers. Innovate Forward wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a revolution. Its programs reshaping boardrooms from Nairobi to New York. Yet the envelope burned in her hands, its weight heavier than paper. Blackwood was Julian's kingdom, a place where her voice had once been drowned by whispers of too much or not enough. Her fingers traced the seal, memories of classrooms where professors praised her intellect but mispronounced her name, of galas where Julian's friends offered backhanded compliments. You're so articulate for someone from your background. The fire in her chest flared, not with rage but with resolve. She didn't need to go. Her life was full, board meetings, speeches, and women whose lives she'd changed. But the invitation wasn't just a call to a reunion. It was a gauntlet, a dare to face the world that had tried to dim her light. Zola's phone buzzed, Kalin Shaw's face lighting up the screen. Her husband, a billionaire investor whose quiet power moved markets, was her anchor. You've seen the Forbes piece? His voice rumbled through the video call, warm but edged with pride. You're not just right, Zola. You're rewriting the rules. Kalin wasn't like Julian. Where Julian craved the spotlight, Kalin wielded influence like a shadow, his wealth a tool, not a trophy. He'd funded Innovate Forward's early days, not out of pity, but belief, sitting in on her strategy sessions, listening to her vision of equity with a stillness that made her feel seen. Blackwood's not ready for you, he said now, his dark eyes steady. But go. Show them the future you're building. Zola's lips curved, a spark igniting. She didn't want revenge. Revenge was too small. She wanted reclamation, to walk into Blackwood not as Julian's ex-wife, but as Zola Vance, the woman whose work commanded billions and changed lives. The envelope felt lighter now, not a burden, but a fuse. She'd attend, not to prove herself to Julian, but to claim the space she'd earned. Across Manhattan, Julian's smirk faded as Blair sipped her wine, her eyes narrowing. She'll show up, Julian, Blair said, her voice smooth but sharp. And she'll act like she's above us. Julian's jaw tightened. Zola's Forbes cover had shaken him, its glow exposing cracks in his carefully curated empire. He'd built his life on deals and dominance. But her success, her audacity to thrive without him, gnawed at him. She's nothing, he muttered, but his fingers betrayed him, clenching the magazine's edge. I'll make sure everyone at Blackwood knows it. Zola stood, her office's skyline view framing her like a portrait of power. She slid the invitation into her bag, her mind already racing to the gown she'd wear. A Ghanaian designer's creation, bold and unapologetic. She wasn't returning to Blackwood to beg for a seat at their table. She was coming to build her own, one that would eclipse theirs. The fire Julian had tried to snuff out years ago was now ablaze, and she'd let it burn bright enough to blind them all. I'm not going to Blackwood to grovel, Kalin. I'm going to torch their stage. Zola Vance's voice crackled with defiance as she faced Kalin Shaw across her San Francisco office, the city's skyline a mosaic of steel and ambition behind her. Her royal blue blazer, sharp as a blade, framed her like a warrior queen, her sleek black hair a banner of unapologetic strength. Kalin, his dark eyes glinting with quiet pride, leaned against her desk, his tailored suit a study in understated power. Then let's make sure they feel the heat, he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. The cream-colored Blackwood invitation lay between them, no longer a taunt, but a fuse, ready to ignite. Zola had decided she wouldn't walk into Blackwood's gilded hall to beg for acceptance from Julian Croft's elitist crowd or prove her worth to the man who'd once dismissed her dreams as cute. She was going to reclaim her space, to stand as the architect of a global movement. Innovate Forward wasn't just her nonprofit. It was a revolution, empowering women of color to lead in boardrooms and parliaments, its impact measured in lives transformed and billions invested. But Blackwood was a battlefield, a place where her passion for equity had been mocked as too idealistic by professors and peers alike. Julian's voice echoed from years past, his words a cold wind. You're wasting your brilliance on lost causes, Zola. She'd let him dim her then, softening her edges to fit his world. Never again. Kalin's hand grazed hers, grounding her. You've already outgrown them, he said, his voice steady but fierce. But they don't know it yet. Together they'd crafted a plan, not just to attend, but to dominate. $100 million donation to Blackwood's leadership program, tied to strict conditions, curricula focused on diversity, equity, and global impact, modeled on Innovate Forward's framework. It wasn't charity, it was a takeover, a way to etch Zola's vision into the institution that once tried to erase her. An email from a nervous board member had arrived that morning. Ms. Vance, your guidance is reshaping our program. Kalin smirked, reading it over her shoulder. They're sweating already. Zola's mind turned to her armor for the night, a gown by a Ghanaian designer, its royal blue fabric woven with threads of gold, a nod to her heritage and a declaration of her power. She'd wear it not to dazzle, but to command, her sleek hair a crown she'd refused to tame. Years ago, Julian had winced at her natural curls, murmuring, "They're a bit much for the gala, don't you think?" She'd straightened them then, each pass of the iron a surrender. Now every choice, her hair, her gown, her presence, was a rebellion, a flame kindled by the woman she'd become. Across the country, in Manhattan's glittering cage, Julian paced his penthouse, Blair lounging on a velvet sofa, her wine glass catching the city's pulse. "She'll come, Julian," Blair said, her voice a blade cloaked in silk. "And she'll try to steal your spotlight." Julian's jaw clenched, the Forbes cover still burning in his mind. Zola's success wasn't just a surprise, it was an affront, a crack in the empire he'd built on deals and charm. He'd spent years at Blackwood basking in its approval, his mergers celebrated as triumphs while Zola's ideas were dismissed as noble but naive. Now her name was on every philanthropist's lips, her nonprofit a global force. "She's a fraud," he spat, but his eyes betrayed doubt, flicking to the invitation on his desk. "I'll make sure Blackwood sees through her." Blair's smile was calculated. "Then make it public," she purred, leaning closer. "Show them she's still the dreamer who doesn't belong." Her words stoked Julian's resolve, his need to reassert dominance over the woman who dared to outshine him. He'd humiliate her, not with shouts, but with the sharp, polished cruelty he'd mastered. Blackwood was his stage, and Zola would be his foil, until she wasn't. Zola stood, her office a crucible of purpose. She opened a sketch of her gown on her tablet, its gold threads glinting like embers. "This isn't about Julian," she told Kalin, her voice steady but fierce. "It's about every woman I've lifted, every door I've opened." Kalin nodded, his silence a vow. He'd be there, not as her savior, but as her equal, his wealth and influence amplifying her fire. The donation was their weapon, a way to rewrite Blackwood's legacy, They'll try to smile and clap, he said, a grin tugging at his lips. But they'll choke on it when they see what you built. As Zola packed the invitation, her fingers steady, she felt the weight of her past lift. Blackwood wasn't her prison anymore. It was her arena. She wasn't returning to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's sneers. She was coming to burn down their illusions, to show a world that had underestimated her what power truly looked like. The fire she'd once buried was now ablaze, and Blackwood would feel its heat. She strides in like she owns Blackwood's soul. Blair's whisper, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the hum of Blackwood's grand hall, her words dripping with venom as she leaned into Julian Croft. Zola Vance stepped through the arched doors, her royal blue gown, woven with Ghanaian gold threads, flaring like a flame in the chandelier's glow. Her sleek black hair, a defiant crown, caught every light, and her presence was a silent detonation, commanding the room without a word. The crowd of elites, tuxedos crisp, gowns shimmering, paused mid-sip, some smirking at the audacity of the woman they once overlooked, others shifting uneasily, sensing a shift in the air. Zola's eyes, twin embers of resolve, swept the hall, undaunted by the weight of their stares. Julian stood near the bar, his tailored suit a veneer of control, but his jaw tightened as whispers rippled. Isn't that Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward woman? Her nonprofit's name was on every philanthropist's lips, its mission to empower women of color in global leadership, a force reshaping power structures. Yet to Julian's Wall Street allies, she was still the dreamer who didn't belong. A former classmate, his tie loosened by bourbon, snorted, "Running a charity must pay peanuts, right?" Zola's lips curved, not in defense, but in quiet disdain, her silence louder than his jab. She moved forward, heels clicking like sparks on marble, each step a challenge to the world that had once tried to dim her. A board member, graying and flustered, intercepted her near a velvet-draped table. "Ms. Vance," he stammered, his bow tie askew, "your involvement with our leadership program is transformative." His deference, a nod to the $100 million donation Zola and Kalin had engineered, hung in the air like smoke, unnoticed by most but heavy with meaning. Zola nodded, her gaze steady, knowing the board's gratitude was less about admiration and more about survival. They'd agreed to her terms, diversity-focused curricula, equity mandates, because her influence left them no choice. She wasn't here to thank them. She was here to claim what was hers. Across the hall, Julian's eyes narrowed, his knuckles whitening around a champagne flute. Blair, in a silver gown that gleamed like ambition, leaned closer, her voice a low hiss. "She's acting like she runs this place. You can't let her steal your night." Julian's smirk was a mask, but inside, Zola's poise was a blade twisting in his pride. He'd ruled Blackwood's social scene years ago, his mergers celebrated while her ideas were dismissed as noble but impractical. Now her name carried weight he couldn't ignore. Forbes covers, global summits, whispers of her impact. "She's a fraud," he muttered, but his voice wavered, betraying the doubt gnawing at him. Blair's eyes glinted, calculating. "Then prove it, Julian. Put her back in her place." Zola felt their stares, twin daggers from across the room, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced this before. Classmates who'd called her too passionate, professors who'd praised her mind but questioned her fit. She'd learned to navigate their world, smiling through their microaggressions. But tonight was different. She wasn't here to play their game. She was here to rewrite the rules. A young alum, her dress vibrant with African print, approached, eyes wide with admiration. "Ms. Vance, your work inspired my nonprofit," she said, voice trembling. "You showed us we don't have to shrink." Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. "Keep burning bright," she said, her words a quiet command. Julian watched, his composure fraying. The hall, once his kingdom, felt unsteady, its air thick with the heat of Zola's presence. He drained his flute, the champagne bitter. Blair's hand tightened on his arm, her smile a polished weapon. "She's turning heads," she whispered, her tone a mix of envy and strategy. "Do something, or she'll eclipse you." Julian nodded, his mind racing. He'd humiliate Zola, not with shouts, but with the sharp, public cruelty he'd perfected. She was a threat, not just to his ego, but to the world he'd built on charm and control. He stepped forward, ready to strike, his words already forming like embers, ready to ignite. Zola sensed the shift, the room's pulse quickening. She stood near a towering floral arrangement, its petals no match for the fire in her stance. She wasn't here to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's schemes. She was here to claim a stage they couldn't fathom, one built on the lives she'd transformed. The board member lingered, offering pleasantries, but her focus was elsewhere, on the oak doors at the hall's end, where Kalin would soon enter. Their plan, a blaze carefully stoked, was about to erupt. She wasn't just attending a reunion, she was setting the stage for a reckoning, one that would leave Julian's world in ashes. Still chasing your little black women's education fantasy, Zola? Innovate backward, is it? Julian Croft's voice sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's glittering din, a polished blade of mockery aimed at Zola Vance. He stood, champagne flute raised, his tailored suit gleaming under the chandelier's fire, surrounded by a knot of Wall Street allies whose smirks mirrored his own. The crowd hushed, their eyes sharp with anticipation, locked on Zola, her royal blue gown a defiant flame against the hall's opulence. Blair, her silver dress catching light like a predator's glint, leaned into Julian, her whisper venomous. "Show her she's nothing here." Julian's smile was a weapon, honed by years of boardroom victories. But beneath it, a flicker of doubt betrayed him. Zola's presence, unyielding and radiant, was a spark he couldn't extinguish. Zola stood near the floral-draped stage, her sleek black hair a crown of defiance. Her gaze a molten arrow that pierced Julian's bravado. The room's pulse stuttered, split between those who laughed with Julian, old Blackwood elites, their privilege a shield, and those who shifted uneasy, sensing a storm. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her glass, whispering to a friend, "She's Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward leader." Zola's nonprofit, a global force empowering women of color in leadership, was no mere charity. It had shifted paradigms, channeling billions into education programs that reshaped power from Lagos to London. Yet Julian's crowd saw only a dreamer out of place. Julian stepped closer, his voice louder, dripping with condescension. "This hall isn't for your little charity stunts, Zola," he said, the words echoing like a gavel. "Stick to your fundraisers. Leave power to those who know it." The insult landed like a match in dry grass, igniting snickers from his allies. Blair's laugh, sharp and crystalline, cut through, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd urged this moment, her whispers in Julian's ear a catalyst. Make her small again. To them, Zola's work, her mission to lift women like her, was a quaint hobby, irrelevant in their world of mergers and money. The crowd leaned in, some relishing the spectacle, others, younger, bolder, frowning, their faith in Zola's vision a quiet rebellion. Zola's smile didn't waver, but it sharpened, a blade of her own. She stood taller, her gown catching the light like a beacon, her silence a firestorm held in check. Every eye felt the weight of her presence, a woman who'd once dimmed herself for Julian's approval, now blazing with purpose. Years ago, his critiques had stung. "Your ideas are too loud, Zola," he'd murmured, dismissing her passion for equity as naive. She'd folded then, softening her voice, her dreams to fit his world. Now she was done bending. "You're wrong, Julian," she said, her voice low but lethal, cutting through the laughter like a spark through smoke. The room gasped, the air electric with her defiance. Julian's smirk faltered, his flute trembling in his hand. He'd expected her to shrink, to flee, as she had in their marriage's quiet battles. But Zola's eyes held no trace of that woman. They burned, unapologetic, as if she saw through his polished cruelty to the insecurity beneath. The Forbes cover, her name on global lips, her nonprofit's billions, they haunted him, a truth he couldn't outrun. He pressed on, voice rising. "You think your little programs matter? This is Blackwood, real power, not your fantasies." His allies chuckled, but the sound was thinner now, their confidence fraying as Zola stood unmoved. A board member, hovering nearby, adjusted his tie, sweat beading on his brow. He knew the truth. Zola's influence had forced Blackwood's hand, her $100 million donation a sword held over their legacy, demanding diversity and equity. His nervous glance flickered to the oak doors at the hall's end, as if sensing the storm about to break. The young alum stepped closer to Zola, her voice soft but firm. "Your work changed my life, Ms. Vance." Others nodded, a ripple of support that Julian didn't see. His focus locked on Zola, desperate to reclaim control. Blair's hand tightened on Julian's arm, her smile a mask of calculation. "Finish it," she hissed, sensing the crowd shift. Julian's eyes narrowed, his pride a fragile ember he couldn't let die. He opened his mouth, another barb ready, but Zola's gaze held him, a fire that burned hotter than his scorn. She didn't need to speak again. Her presence was a verdict, a promise that his world was about to crumble. The hall's air thickened, every breath heavy with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the crowd, the oak doors quivered, a low groan signaling Kalin Shaw's approach. Zola's lips twitched, a spark of knowing. Julian's blade had struck, but hers was sharper, and the inferno was coming. "Your leadership program's reshaping the world, Zola." Kalin Shaw's voice thundered as the oak doors of Blackwood's Grand Hall crashed open, his navy suit cutting through the chandelier's glow like a blade of midnight. Zola Vance stood unshaken, her royal blue gown a blazing ember in the room's stunned silence, her sleek black hair a defiant crown. A massive screen behind the stage flared to life, its bold white text searing the crowd. "Innovate forward, 1.5 and 1 women empowered, 3B education impact." The elites, tuxedos stiff, gowns shimmering, gaped, their champagne flutes frozen midair. Some, the younger alums, erupted in applause. Others, Julian Croft's Wall Street cronies, exchanged uneasy glances, their smirks from moments ago dissolving like ash. Julian stood rooted, his face paling, the flute in his hand trembling as Kalin's presence, a billionaire titan whose wealth dwarfed their fortunes, shifted the room's gravity. Zola's eyes, twin flames of triumph, met Kalin's, a silent vow passing between them. He strode toward her, his steps deliberate, each one a spark igniting the hall's tension. "Your work's been endorsed by the United Nations," he said, loud enough for all to hear, his voice a low, resonant fire. "You're not just leading, Zola, you're rewriting history." The words landed like a torch in dry grass, burning away Julian's venomous taunt. "Innovate backward," that had echoed minutes before. Zola's smile, sharp and unyielding, was a blade of its own, slicing through the remnants of his scorn. She stepped forward, her voice clear, cutting, "My charity stunts just changed the game, Julian." The crowd gasped, a wave of shock rippling through silk and satin, her words a direct answer to his insult. Julian's jaw clenched, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape. Blair, her silver gown now a dull sheen, gripped his arm, her face a mask of forced composure. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride. But now the room tilted against them. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, shouted, "Her programs transformed my company." Others joined, their cheers a rising flame, while Julian's allies shifted, their laughter replaced by murmurs of doubt. The board member who'd fawned over Zola earlier now stood at the stage's edge, his tie askew, voice trembling as he seized the microphone. "Blackwood is honored to announce a $100 million donation," he stammered, "establishing the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, funded by Mr. Kalin Shaw." The hall erupted, gasps, applause, and whispers colliding like sparks in a storm. The screen flashed again, detailing Innovate Forward's impact, empowering women of color in global leadership. Zola stood center stage, her presence a beacon, not a plea for approval. She'd forced Blackwood's hand, her donation tied to demands for diversity curricula, a legacy that would outlast the hall's marble columns. Kalin stood beside her, not as a savior, but an amplifier, his hand grazing hers, a quiet signal. "Your fire burns brightest." The crowd's applause swelled, but it was uneven. Some clapped out of awe, others out of obligation, their world upended by a woman they'd underestimated. Julian's flute slipped, champagne splashing his cuff. His eyes, once sharp with condescension, were hollow, his empire of charm crumbling. He'd mocked Zola's mission, called it a fantasy, but now her name was carved into Blackwood's future. Blair's smile froze, her fingers digging into his arm, her own ambition tarnished by his misstep. "You didn't know," she hissed, her voice barely audible, a betrayal cloaked in silk. Julian opened his mouth, a retort forming, but it died as another alum called out, "Zola's work is on every global stage." The words stung, each one a reminder of his blindness. Zola didn't gloat. Her gaze swept the room, steady, searing, a fire that needed no fuel. She'd come not to fight Julian, but to claim her truth, a truth now undeniable, projected in bold letters above her. The board member, sweating, continued, "The Institute will champion Ms. Vance's vision, equity, leadership, change." The younger crowd roared, their phones already capturing the moment. One alum typing furiously, "Zola Vance just owned Blackwood, Black excellence." Julian's allies turned away, their whispers now of damage control, their power slipping like smoke through their fingers. Kalin's presence, a quiet titan beside Zola, was a verdict. He didn't need to speak again. His entrance, his wealth, his belief in her had shifted the hall's axis. Zola nodded to the crowd, her silence louder than their applause, her gown catching the light like a flame that refused to dim. Julian stood, a shadow in his own kingdom, watching the woman he'd scorned become its center. The oak doors behind him stood open, their groan a fading echo, but the inferno Zola and Kalin had ignited was only beginning to burn. "You picked the wrong side, Blair." A donor's curt dismissal sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's fading applause, his eyes cold as he brushed past Blair, her silver gown now a tarnished sheen in the chandelier's flicker. Zola Vance stood center stage, her royal blue gown a smoldering ember, her sleek black hair a defiant crown against the screen, still blazing with Innovate Forward's metrics. 1.5 M Women Empowered, 3B Education Impact. The crowd's cheers lingered, but the air was thick with a new tension. Julian Croft's empire of charm was crumbling, and Blair's calculated poise was cracking beside him. Julian's face, once sharp with condescension, was a mask of ash, his champagne flute forgotten, its contents staining the marble floor. Zola's gaze, a molten blade, met his for a fleeting moment, not with triumph, but with a verdict. "You're irrelevant." The hall buzzed, a hive of whispers and shifting allegiances. Julian's Wall Street allies who'd laughed at his taunt, "Innovate backward," moments before, now averted their eyes, their smirks replaced by nervous glances. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her phone, her ex-post already gaining traction. "Zola Vance just owned Blackwood, round Black excellence." The words spread like wildfire, each retweet a spark igniting Julian's humiliation beyond the hall's gilded walls. Donors who'd once courted his deals drifted toward Zola, their handshakes eager, their voices low with awe. "Ms. Vance, your institute will change everything." She nodded, her silence a fire that needed no fuel, her presence a beacon that outshone their flattery. Blair's fingers dug into Julian's arm, her smile a brittle facade. "Fix this," she hissed, her voice a desperate ember beneath her polished exterior. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride, but now her own ambition was singed by his misstep. She stepped toward a cluster of donors, her laugh forced, her gown catching light like a fading star. "Julian was just joking earlier," she said, her voice too bright, too thin. The donor's reply was ice. "You picked the wrong side, Blair." Her smile faltered, her eyes darting to Zola, who stood unmoved, a pillar of fire in a room that no longer belonged to them. Blair's world, built on proximity to power, was unraveling, her elegance no match for Zola's undeniable truth. Julian's breath hitched, his jaw clenching as he watched the crowd orbit Zola. He'd mocked her as a dreamer, a fraud, but the screen above, its numbers unassailable, proved her a titan. The Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, funded by Kalin Shaw's $100 million, wasn't just a donation. It was a monument to her vision, one he'd dismissed as charity stunts. His allies, once loyal, now whispered of his blunder. He didn't know who he was messing with. A former classmate, now a tech entrepreneur, leaned toward another. Her programs are reshaping my boardroom. Julian's hand trembled, the weight of his mistake a flame licking at his pride. He opened his mouth, a weak defense forming, but the words died as Zola's gaze swept past him, dismissing him without effort. Kalin stood beside Zola, his navy suit a quiet contrast to her radiance, his presence a steady inferno amplifying hers. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His entrance had shifted the hall's axis, his wealth and belief in Zola, a verdict on Julian's irrelevance. The board member, still sweating, hovered nearby, murmuring to a colleague, "Her conditions, diversity, equity, are rewriting our curriculum." Zola's influence wasn't just personal, it was systemic, a fire burning through Blackwood's outdated foundations. A young woman, inspired by Zola's work, approached, her voice trembling. "Ms. Vance, you showed me I can lead without shrinking." Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. "Keep rising," she said, her words a quiet command that echoed louder than the hall's applause. Julian's allies drifted further, their handshakes now offered to Kalin, their smiles forced. Blair's eyes narrowed, her composure fracturing as she realized her own status was tied to Julian's sinking ship. She tried again, approaching another donor, her voice saccharine. "We're thrilled for Blackwood's future." The donor turned away, muttering, "Align with winners next time." The rejection stung, a public wound that mirrored Julian's. He stood frozen, a shadow in a hall he once ruled, his pride reduced to cinders. Zola didn't look back. Her fire had burned brighter than his scorn, and the room knew it. The screen above flickered, its metrics a relentless reminder. Zola's work wasn't a dream, it was a revolution. The X post gained millions of views, its hashtag trending globally. Black excellence. Julian's name, once a badge of power, now trended for all the wrong reasons. Zola and Kalin stood as one, their silhouettes a promise of what was to come. The hall's chatter faded, but the fire they'd ignited burned on, ready to consume the last of Julian's world. "I turned their stage to ashes, Kalin." Zola Vance's voice, fierce and unbroken, cut through the hum of the car as she leaned back, her royal blue gown catching the city's neon pulse through the tinted windows. Kalin Shaw, his navy suit still sharp as a blade, gripped her hand, his dark eyes glinting with a pride that burned hotter than the Blackwood Grand Hall's chandeliers. "You didn't just win, Zola," he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. "You redefined their world." Their silhouettes, framed against San Francisco's starlit skyline, were a portrait of unyielding power, a testament to the inferno they'd ignited. The hall's gilded walls, Julian Croft's shattered pride, and Blair's crumbling ambition lay behind them, reduced to embers in the wake of Zola's triumph. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, the screen alight with notifications. The X post from the young alum, Zola Vance, just owned Blackwood. Black excellence had exploded, millions of views pouring in, retweets spreading like wildfire across continents. Comments flooded, "She shut down Wall Street arrogance," and "Her institute's changing the game." The hashtag trended globally, a digital blaze that carried Zola's name from the hall to the world. She scrolled, her lips curving as she read a message from a young woman in Nairobi. "Your work gave me courage to lead." Zola's heart flared, not with pride but purpose. This wasn't about Julian's defeat, it was about the women she'd lifted, the futures she'd forged. Back in the hall, Julian stood alone, a shadow amidst the fading clatter of champagne flutes. His tailored suit, once a badge of dominance, hung heavy, stained with the champagne he'd spilled in his shock. The screen's metrics, 1.5 mm, women empowered, 3B education impact, still burned in his mind, a relentless reminder of Zola's power. His allies had scattered, their handshakes withdrawn, their whispers now of his misstep. He mocked her? She's untouchable. Blair had slipped away, her silver gown a ghost in the crowd, her final words to him a hiss. "You dragged us both down." Julian's jaw clenched, his pride a pile of ash. He'd thought Blackwood was his kingdom, But Zola had turned it into her arena, and he was the fool left standing in its ruins. Zola leaned against Kalin, the car's leather cool against her skin. "This wasn't revenge," she said, her voice steady but alive with fire. "It was for every woman told to shrink." Kalin's nod was silent, his hand a steady anchor. He'd never sought the spotlight, his billionaire status a tool, not a crown. At Blackwood, his entrance had been a spark, his $100 million donation a flame. But it was Zola's vision, the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, that burned brightest. "They'll talk about tonight for years," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "But you're just getting started." The city's lights streaked past, each one a star in Zola's constellation. She thought of the young alum, her African print dress vibrant, her words a vow, "You showed me I can lead." Zola's work wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was lives transformed, from boardrooms in Accra to classrooms in Chicago. The ex-post's reach grew, comments pouring in from women she'd never met. "I'm applying for your program. You're my hero." Each message was a spark, kindling a movement that Julian's world could never contain. Zola's fingers tightened around Kalin's, her resolve a blaze that no one could extinguish. In Manhattan, Julian sat in his penthouse, the city's glow mocking him through floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone was silent, his inbox empty of the usual deal offers. The ex-post had branded him a fool, his name trending alongside Zola's, but for all the wrong reasons. Donors he'd courted now praised her institute, their emails citing equity and envision, words he'd once scoffed at. Blair's absence stung, her social media dark, her ambitions severed by his failure. He poured a whiskey, its burn no match for the fire Zola had unleashed. He'd thought he could bury her, but she'd buried him, her legacy a flame that would outlast his empire. Zola closed her eyes, the car's hum a rhythm to her thoughts. She saw the women her programs had lifted, mothers, students, leaders, each one a spark in her revolution. The Blackwood Hall, with its chandeliers and elites, was a fading memory, its power dwarfed by the world she was building. "They thought they could dim me," she murmured, her voice a quiet inferno. Kalin's hand squeezed hers, his silence a promise. "You're unstoppable." The ex-post's glow lit her screen, its reach a testament to her fire. She wasn't just leaving Blackwood behind. She was lighting a path forward, one that would burn brighter than any hall could contain. "Leadership means lifting all, and I'm here to ensure it." Zola Vance's voice rang clear across the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, its sleek halls alive with the hum of ambition. The Blackwood campus, once a gilded cage of exclusion, now pulsed with purpose, its walls lined with screens flashing Innovate Forward's metrics, 1.5 M women empowered, 3B education impact. Her royal blue dress, a nod to the gown that had blazed at the reunion, shimmered under the Institute's skylights, her sleek black hair a crown of unwavering resolve. The audience, global leaders, students, and educators, hung on her words, their applause a rising flame. Zola stood not as a guest in their world, but as its architect, her vision of equity and leadership etched into every corner of this new legacy. The Institute's opening marked a triumph far beyond the Blackwood Grand Hall's fleeting drama. That night when Julian Croft's scorn had met Kalin Shaw's thunderous entrance, it had been a spark. This was the inferno. Zola's speech wove a vision of a world where women of color led without apology, their voices amplified by programs she'd built from the ashes of doubt. A young woman, her braids vibrant against her blazer, approached after the speech, eyes gleaming with fire. "Ms. Vance, you showed me I don't have to shrink," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I'm leading a startup now because of your programs." Zola's smile, warm yet unyielding, was a spark passed forward. "Keep burning bright," she said, her words a vow that echoed through the hall. Kalin stood at the crowd's edge, his navy suit a quiet contrast to the room's energy, his pride a steady ember. He'd never sought the spotlight, his billionaire status a tool to amplify Zola's fire, not overshadow it. Their partnership, forged in shared purpose, had turned Blackwood's elitism into a platform for change. The Institute's curriculum, shaped by Innovate Forward's equity mandates, was training a new generation, women from Chicago to Accra, their leadership redefining boardrooms and governments. Kalin's gaze met Zola's, a silent promise. Your light is unstoppable. She nodded, her heart a furnace of purpose, knowing this was only the beginning. Across the world, the X post from that reunion night still burned, its hashtag, Chakun, Black Excellence, alive with millions of voices. Messages poured in, a teacher in Lagos inspired to start a leadership program, a student in Harlem applying to the Institute, a CEO in London citing Zola's work in her keynote. Each was a spark, kindling a movement that Julian's world could never contain. Zola scrolled through her phone backstage, her lips curving as she read a comment. Zola Vance didn't just win, she changed the game. The reunion's echoes had faded, but its fire had spread, a global blaze no one could extinguish. In Manhattan, Julian sat in his dim penthouse, the city's skyline a cold mockery through his windows. His phone was silent, his once buzzing network reduced to whispers of his blunder. The X post had branded him a relic, his name a cautionary tale beside Zola's rising star. Donors who'd once flocked to him now funded her institute, their emails praising equity and vision, words he'd mocked as naive. Blair was gone, her social media silent, her ambitions severed by his failure. He poured a whiskey, its burn hollow compared to the inferno Zola had unleashed. He'd thought he could bury her, but she'd built a legacy that buried him, its flames outlasting his fated empire. Zola walked the Institute's halls, her heels clicking like sparks on marble. Portraits of women she'd mentored lined the walls, leaders, educators, changemakers, each a testament to her revolution. She paused at a screen displaying a new metric, 2M Women Empowered. Her work wasn't numbers, it was lives, stories, futures. The young woman's words echoed in her mind. I don't have to shrink. Zola had once folded herself to fit Julian's world, her dreams dimmed by his scorn. Now she stood unbowed, her fire a beacon for those who'd been told to fade. The audience lingered, their chatter a hum of possibility. A professor approached, her voice reverent. Your institute is reshaping how we teach leadership. Zola nodded, her gaze steady. It's not about leading alone, she said. It's about lifting others. Her words, simple yet searing, carried the weight of her journey, from Blackwood's sneers to this moment, where her name was a movement. The X post's glow still lit her phone, its reach a reminder. Her fire had sparked a global blaze. Kalin joined her, his hand grazing hers, a quiet anchor. You've built something eternal, he said, his voice low but fierce. Zola's eyes burned with purpose, not pride. She wasn't here to bask, she was here to forge. The Institute was her legacy, but its true power lay in the women it would lift, the worlds it would reshape. As she stepped into the hall's light, her silhouette was aflame, unquenchable, undeniable, a fire that would burn for generations. Thank you for walking with Zola Vance through her blazing triumph, from Julian's scorn to a legacy that reshapes the world. Her fire sparks a question. Have you ever risen above doubt to claim your space? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters. We're grateful for your journey with us and look forward to sharing more stories that inspire. Until next time, keep